Welcome to a very special edition of the Football Reporters, because as Cristiano Ronaldo turns 40 years old, we're going to be taking a deeper dive into the life and career of the man who became a household name at many of the world's biggest clubs, including Manchester United and Real Madrid. We're going to be talking about how a boy from Madeira, Portugal, became probably one of the GOATs to have ever played the beautiful game. I'm Alexis Nunes, and I'll be joined by some of ESPN's finest as we look back and talk about some amazing stories of the man, the myth, the legend himself, CR7. Joining me now, though, is Rob Dawson and Mark Ogden, two men who got to see this man play week in, week out, especially when he started off at Manchester United. And that's exactly where we're going to start the story now, but also how he got to Manchester United when he was just a young boy playing for Sporting Lisbon. Now, if we look at the stats, guys, 5 goals in 31 appearances. That was at the end of the 2002-03 season. Now, when we look at those numbers, it's not exactly screaming GOAT material, but we do know that after that, Sporting played a very special preseason friendly, and that's when Cristiano caught the eye of all of those that mattered at United. Rob, let me start with you on this one, because you reported on this. Talk us through how it all happened.
So United had followed Cristiano for a while. The summer of 2003 was a bit, there was quite a lot of upheaval at Old Trafford anyway. David Beckham had left and gone to Real Madrid. They tried to sign Ronaldinho from PSG as kind of Beckham's replacement. That hadn't worked out. He ended up at Barcelona. So United were kind of in this, obviously looking for someone really to replace Beckham and kind of give the fans a bit of a lift. As I said, the United scouts had tracked Ronaldo for a while. They had agreed to play this pre-season friendly against Sporting Lisbon. They'd already done a deal for Ronaldo, but the idea was that Ronaldo would stay at Sporting Lisbon for another year. He would play regularly, he would get a bit more experience and come to Old Trafford in the summer of 2004. Obviously, United turn up, play this pre-season friendly against Sporting Lisbon. They are off the back of a pre-season tour in America, so all the players are saying that they're jet lagged, they're not really feeling this game. They turn up against Sporting Lisbon and they've got this 18-year-old kid who is absolutely destroying them. I spoke to Quinton Fortune, who played for United that day. He played at left back, and he said that you could see Ronaldo on the other side of the pitch, and Ronaldo was so good that Fortune said that he was praying that Ronaldo just didn't come over to his side. John O'Shea was playing at right back that day. Obviously, the famous story is that John O'Shea, obviously a very accomplished defender, got absolutely torn to pieces by this kid that no one really knew anything about, and he was so good that there was Roy Keane and Ryan Giggs who didn't play in that game. They were sat up in the stands, and after the game, Roy Keane rang Peter Kenyon, who was United CEO at the time, and said, I don't know if you've done this deal or not for that kid, but he needs to be on the plane back with us to Manchester now. We're not waiting a year. He's coming back with us now. That's how good Ronaldo was that day, and obviously turned up at United that same summer, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I spoke to Rio Ferdinand this a while ago, and Rio said that, he mentioned John O'Shea and said that Ronaldo gave him twisted blood. He was that he was that good that night. And he said that what he remembers from that game was that they were sat on the coach, the players were sat on the coach for probably 2 hours after the game. Like Rob said, they were all jet lagged, they wanted to go home, but basically they were kept on the bus because Sir Alex Ferguson and the United hierarchy were upstairs doing the deal with Sporting Lisbon to get the deal done, to get Ronaldo back to Manchester that week. There was an idea they could have left it 6 months, 12 months maybe, but there was interest at the time from Arsenal. We're interested in
Barcelona, Real Madrid. Yeah, they're all sniffing around.
But I think Arsenal was the firm. Like, he might even have gone to Arsenal, to speak to Wenger at one point. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure he went to Arsenal to have not so much a trial, but just exploratory talks. But obviously United were aware there was competition, so they got the deal done. And I remember I think it was a Friday. I was working at the time, and there was this press release came through from United about this kid that we'd never heard of, Cristiano Ronaldo. And we all thought that, it was called Cristiano because Ronaldo was Ronaldo, the Brazilian Ronaldo. And so initially, for a couple of days, he was known as Cristiano until he became Cristiano Ronaldo. And then he made his debut at home to Bolton at Old Trafford. And I think the Bolton right back was called Nicky Hunt. And again, Nicky Hunt was given the same twisted blood that John O'Shea had. And from that point on, he had a bit of a tricky start in his first couple of seasons because it was all about tricks and flicks, and he was told by a few of the players and the coaches, you've got to cut these flicks out. And there's a story about Walter Smith, Ferguson had brought Walter Smith in as his assistant. I think Carlos Queiroz had gone to Real Madrid. Maybe that's in Ronaldo's second year. And obviously Carlos was a big kind of father figure to Ronaldo. And Walter Smith, who was obviously Rangers manager, really successful at Rangers and Everton, he was a long time mate of Sir Alex Ferguson's. And Fergie tells a story whereby Walter Smith would be left to take training. And in training, Ronaldo would do exactly what he did in the pitch. He would tricks and flicks and, humiliate his defenders to the point where they were kicking him. And in those training sessions, Ronaldo was screaming, for protection from the referee, who was Walter Smith, and Smith just ignored him. It was almost like, nah, sorry, mate, you're going to have to learn the hard way. And so basically, he was kicked and kicked and kicked in training, and he continued to take it, and it toughened him up. But, without going on too long about what a great player he was, Rio also told me what an absolute consummate professional he was. So
Yeah.
he said that obviously, we all know the stories about the great players who do a bit extra. They go back on the training pitch. He said that what Ronaldo would do is he would put ankle weights on his legs. He'd go back out with his ankle weights on and do his, they call them his lollipops and his step overs. He'd do practice his step overs with his ankle weights on or his free kick.
To build the muscle.
To build the muscle, but also when he was playing, he'd feel so much lighter, so much kind of like he was running on air. So the preparation and the devotion and the dedication that he showed back then is why he's now still playing at 40 years old, because he's given everything to the game. And that's why I admire him so much, that he's squeezed everything possible out of his talent and more.
There's a story in the piece that's online that's told by Quentin Fortune, where he says that obviously when Ronaldo arrived, he was speaking Portuguese, couldn't really speak very much English. Quentin Fortune had spent time at Atletico Madrid, so could converse a little bit in Spanish. So he would talk to him in Spanish, and Ronaldo would talk to him in Portuguese. And on one of his first days, they were talking to each other, and Ronaldo told Fortune that he was going to be the best. And Fortune said, in his head, he thought, well, maybe I've not translated that right in my head.
Yeah.
Maybe there's been something lost in translation, and went to double check. And Ronaldo said, no, I am going to be the best. And Fortune told in this story, says, he walked away thinking, yeah, go on then. All right, fair enough. And then
He did.
He did. Exactly that. And that just shows that the dedication he had in those early days at Man United, because it was such a tough environment to walk into. You talk about players like Rio Ferdinand, Roy Keane, Ryan Giggs, these serial winners, professionals for years and years and years. And to come into that environment, not only thrive, but to tell all these players that he was going to be better than them. That's incredible. To have that dedication, that self-belief and that drive, that's what set him apart. And it was evident as a teenager when he first arrived at Man United.
Now, I would love to share my stories week in, week out about Cristiano Ronaldo, but when he signed for Manchester United, I was only beginning secondary school. But of course, as someone who does support United, I remember it. And I remember the iconic jumper that he was wearing. I remember his photos with Sir Alex, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed with a gap in his teeth, the frosted tips, looking like he was straight out of a boy band from Portugal. And in terms of games early on that stuck out to me, I remember when he scored a brace against Arsenal in that black Vodafone kit too, and he went to do the man of the match interview after, and I think he did it with Giggsy, and they asked him the question, as you do, and you could tell he was like, uh-oh, and all he could say was good game, good performance, team win, happy. And then they asked him another one. They said, well, walk us through the first of your goals, let us know, because the step-overs were brilliant. And he was like, and he looked at Giggsy, and Giggsy had to step in and do the interview for him. And you think of the person who is larger than life now, that is Cristiano Ronaldo. He obviously had to grow up pretty fast, but it seemed like it was always destined for him to become that person at United, especially because he was given the number 7 shirt. And I remember, of course, you think of Cantona, you think of, these big, larger than life characters, and you see this young kid bringing his tricks and flicks and whatnot. Augie, when you saw him given that shirt that holds so much weight, what did you think, and what was the reaction here in the UK?
Well, it was a bit of a surprise, because obviously David Beckham had vacated it, so Beckham was a superstar. Beckham was a megastar, but Ronaldo kind of eclipsed it eventually, didn't he? But yeah, you're right. The legacy of that shirt was Beckham. He took it off Eric Cantona, who took it off Brian Robson. It's not been so successful since Ronaldo left the first time. It's gone down a little bit, that shirt. But no, he was given it, and I don't think he knew the history of it, so I don't think it weighed him down too much. And at the time, it was probably easier to take the shirt then, playing in such a great team, as Rob said, surrounded by Ferdinand, Keane, Giggs, Van Nistelrooy, Rooney, all these players. So there was not so much pressure. To take that shirt now in a much weaker United team would be harder. And we've seen that with the players that have taken it. But no, he took it like to a duck to water, and there's never any issue with it whatsoever. He was always, one of the magnificent 7 that United used to have.
I do think it shows a bit about his character, though, because it may, for people who are listening, it may seem just like a number. Like, what does a number really matter? But Fergie put a lot of thought into these things. And when Cantona left, David Beckham was wearing 10, and he took 10 off him, didn't he, and gave it to Teddy Sheringham and gave Beckham 7. It was that kind of it wasn't just a kind of a writing a number down next to a player. It was a serious thing. And to give a teenager who'd never played in the Premier League that 7 shirt, was a massive show of faith from Sir Alex. But for Ronaldo to kind of wear that and not be weighed down, and you talk about the players who've worn it since, players like Alexis Sanchez, who had played for Arsenal, played for Barcelona. When he failed at Man United, there was talk that shirt, the kind of the spotlight, the pressure weighed him down. And you're talking about a guy who played at Arsenal and Barcelona. And the same goes for players like Mason Mount. Antonio Valencia took it. Antonio Valencia took it for a season and then reverted back to 25 because he didn't want it anymore. But Ronaldo came from abroad, from playing his first year in the Premier League, took this shirt, and it just didn't seem to bother him at all. And in fairness, if anything, he kind of grew into it. And, you referenced in the intro there, CR7, it became part of his brand. We wore 28, didn't he, at Sporting Lisbon, but he became Cristiano Ronaldo 7. It became part of his character.
Yeah, exactly. And as we were talking about the weight of the shirts, or not for certain people, and David Beckham, I would think anybody that's followed David Beckham's career or seen his recent documentary, that even though Manchester United had this team littered with some big names, there was no bigger name at Manchester United than Sir Alex Ferguson. He ran a tight ship, and you saw the relationship, how it could be great on the best of days, like David Beckham showed us, but when it's not so good, it can really affect your entire career. But Cristiano Ronaldo seemed to have, for someone who arrived and could only probably say, hello, my name is Cristiano Ronaldo, to speak to a Scotsman, to understand his accent, to understand his philosophy, he has such a special relationship with Sir Alex Ferguson. He credits him, still to this day. Obviously, Cristiano lost his father at a young age while he was still playing in his career. And he said that Sir Alex kind of became his father. But, Augie, like I said, they couldn't be more different. But just talk us through how you saw this relationship flourish.
It was like a favoured child, It was, I think, the only player that got anything like that kind of relationship with Fergie was Eric Cantona. And the simple fact is, Eric Cantona, Cristiano Ronaldo won Sir Alex Ferguson matches and trophies. And that's why he gave them, I won't say, he probably indulged them as well. He gave them more space to do things than other players. Now,
why is that, do you think? Because again, we look at the Beckham thing, and he's quick to, when he sees them doing too much, Fergie's quick to say, let me bring you back down.
As I was saying about Ronaldo previously, that he was on the training ground all day long, so Ferguson could never question his mentality. I think with Beckham, he felt that Beckham's focus had been taken away by, doing more celebrity things with his wife. And whether that's true or not, there was an element that Ferguson thought that Beckham had kind of, his persona had become too big. But with Ronaldo, he was always first and foremost a footballer. And I think that's why Ferguson was such a father figure, that, like you say. But I mean, I remember being at games where Ronaldo really pushed the buttons. Any of the player would have been absolutely hauled of a coal. So there's one occasion, I think he was playing Stoke in his last season, and he was taken off. He just walked off. He didn't go to the sideline. He walked off as if he was unhappy about it. Ferguson did bat an eyelid. If that was Ryan Giggs or Paul Scholes or Wayne Rooney, who got the other side of the treatment, it would have been, there would have been hell to pay. And I remember also a game when I think they were playing Man City in a Manchester derby again in his last season. He was taken off, and Ronaldo, grabbed his top and threw his top to the floor. Got away with it, no problem. Doesn't matter, because Ferguson knew that he was the golden child in many ways, and you don't treat your golden child like he's, you don't shout at them, because you had to handle him in a certain way. A lot of players might have been frustrated by that, but they kind of kept their mouths shut and put up with it, because they knew that they were going to win the league that year, because Ronaldo, he won the European Cup, Champions League. So you put up with these, sometimes histrionics from big players, because they deliver things and they win things.
I think the key with that relationship was that Fergie, and Mark's touched on it there, that Fergie valued dedication above anything else. And it didn't actually really matter what you did away from football, or if you were a pain in those incidents, if you were coming off after being substituted and chucking your top on the ground. As long as you were back on a training ground on Monday morning, doing your gym work, putting the extras in after training, turning up in games and being that match winner, Fergie would kind of let a lot of that stuff slide. The moment that the problems he had with players was when that dedication slipped a little bit. And you speak to as many people you want about Ronaldo, and people will decide whether he's the greatest of all time or not, or whether they think he's overrated or underrated. You cannot find one person that questions his dedication. And his dedication was the same at 18 as it is at 40. And you can see with the way that he's built and his body shape and things, that he's been like that all the way through his career. And that's the constant all the way through his career, that he's never let that standard drop. And Fergie saw that. And the minute that it dropped, Fergie would have been on him like anything. But because that standard remained really high, he was allowed to do what he wanted, because he remained a match winner.
I'm pretty sure Rob is following Cristiano Ronaldo's diet and workout plan, right? Well, I mean, as I said, it wasn't all just, a bed of roses when he started out at Manchester United. He did endure some difficult times. We spoke about his wonderful relationship that he still has with Sir Alex Ferguson, but he did have some fallouts with Ruud van Nistelrooy as well as Wayne Rooney. Whether it was a personal fallout, we could get into that too. Of course, it was when Wayne Rooney was sent off at the 2006 World Cup. So it's not like but I know it was, your friends, of course, or you could be teammates, but when you're playing for your country at a World Cup, that's a different thing. But how do you feel like these fallouts, first of all, Augie, just tell us what you know about the backstories to these two fallouts and how it probably affected his time at Manchester United, probably what he would have gone through or what you heard some of the chatter was like.
Yeah, well, the Van Nistelrooy one was different, really. And I think they were all the same. So 2006, Van Nistelrooy was sold by United. And the last couple of years that Van Nistelrooy was there, I won't say he became a difficult... Van Nistelrooy's got a difficult character at times, and he was very much a selfish goal scorer, and he wanted the wingers to put the ball into him in the 6-yard box. First time cross, bang, goal. That's exactly what Van Nistelrooy did, and he was frustrated with Ronaldo that it wasn't going in.
He wanted the smoke.
He was beating his man, he was taking it up again, and Van Nistelrooy stood with his hands on his hips like, where's the cross coming in? So Van Nistelrooy felt that, one, that Ronaldo wasn't a proper winger that was going to deliver the service, and also Van Nistelrooy was unhappy that United weren't winning things. At that time, United had kind of had a bit of a dip. Chelsea were the dominant force, and Van Nistelrooy was impatient, wanted to win things. He felt that he couldn't wait for these players to deliver. So there were a couple of incidents where Van Nistelrooy took his frustrations out on Ronaldo at the training ground. I think there's one element where I think Ronaldo's dad had died, and Carlos Queiroz was very close to Ronaldo, and I think there's a story that Van Nistelrooy had upset Ronaldo, and Ronaldo was visibly upset with tears, and he was told to go and cry to your dad, i.e. Queiroz, but obviously his dad had just died, so that was quite... Now Van Nistelrooy has since said him and Ronaldo have made it up, and he's apologised, and they smoothed over the water. So that's the backstory to the Van Nistelrooy thing. At that time, it's worth remembering, prior to the 2006 World Cup, that if you asked a United fan or Ferguson then to toss a coin, if you were going to back one to succeed, it would be Rooney. Ronaldo hadn't really kicked on by that point. He was obviously a talented player, but he hadn't become the goal machine that we expected. Ironically, that started after the World Cup in 2006 when he came back with the whole situation with Rooney having been sent. Rooney was sent off for a foul on Ricardo Carvalho against Portugal. Ronaldo, as we know, winked at his teammates for saying, I've got him sent off. But that was never an issue. They came back, and I've spoken to people around Wayne about this, and Cristiano and Ferguson. It was never an issue. The issue was outside. It was Ferguson had to persuade Ronaldo that, yes, you'll get a lot of criticism from outside the club, like Beckham did in '98 after being sent off against Argentina. But Ferguson's like, look, we'll protect you. And him and Rooney were fine. Great double act. And there was never an issue. And from that point on, whether that galvanised Ronaldo or not, I know, but from then on, he became this absolute superstar goal machine that delivered so much. I think that season United won the league. They won the first of 3 successive titles. And it was all on the back of that 2006 World Cup.
You saw this kind of transformation really in Ronaldo. You mentioned there about the boy who turned up at Old Trafford in his colourful jumper, blonde tips, scrawny little teenager,
cornrows.
Yeah, gradually became this kind of really slick, shiny, really well built. Obviously, doing loads of gym work. Became just a completely different person and a different player. We spoke to Shaka Hislop. Obviously an ESPN favourite who Ronaldo had scored his first goal against. He was in goal for Portsmouth, I think.
We remember him every day.
Yeah. He did say that in the interview, actually. He said, I can't believe you've reminded me of this again. But he said that the goal that Ronaldo scored, that first one, it was scored by a skinny teenager. But then when opposing teams would come to look at Ronaldo in later seasons, you'd see this kind of giant of a guy, and Portsmouth fullbacks would say, I can't push him off the ball anymore. I can't just get a hand on it, a hand across him and stop him, because he's just like this absolute machine. And you saw this transformation really in terms of his body and what he looked like, but also in his position as well, that he's come as a kind of a flashy winger. And then gradually Ferguson kind of transformed him into a centre forward. He played, I think, in a Champions League semi-final away at Barcelona in 2008 maybe, as a centre forward, which was a bit of a surprise on the day because we'd never really seen him in playing that position. But he just turned into this kind of complete goal scorer. He went from a guy that was scoring sort of 10 goals here or there to scoring a goal every game to win United leagues, and it just elevated him to a completely different level and set him on the path to that kind of superstardom he had at Real Madrid.
For you, Augie, what was the point where that boy became that man that Rob's talking about?
I think it was when he came back from the World Cup in 2006. I think he just propelled himself onto a different level. But I think as well, and players who played in that team that United have told me since that a lot of credit has to go to Wayne Rooney for that, because Wayne Rooney basically sacrificed himself to accommodate Ronaldo. So Rooney was obviously centre forward, or he could play through the middle. Ferguson put him out wide, and basically he did the work for Ronaldo. Ronaldo would very rarely come back. Rooney was a brilliant player because he was a fantastic goal scorer, but he's also somebody who would put everything for the team. He was an ultimate team player, Wayne Rooney. And, for 2-3 years, Wayne Rooney did everything to help Ronaldo be the player he was. So the guy that, people thought he'd fell out with the World Cup was actually the guy that helped make him what he was. Physically, he grew into his body. He was no longer a boy, he was a man, and that made a difference as well. But obviously the maturity that comes with playing, at a high level for a long period of time. But also, Carlos Tevez was another part of that fantastic front three that United had: Tevez, Rooney, Ronaldo. With Tevez and Rooney alongside you doing all this incredible work, first of all, they're taking the attention of defenders away from you, but they're also doing all your work.
Yeah.
So Ronaldo was benefiting from that. So I think it was a collective thing. Obviously himself was realising his potential by working hard, developing his body, but he had players around him who knew how good he was, who would sacrifice their natural part of their game to ensure that Ronaldo was better, but also that the team, the benefit was that they made Ronaldo better, but that made the team better, and United won the Champions League.
Well, with everything we've just said, like I said, by the summer of 2008, Cristiano Ronaldo was a household name. He was definitely one of the best players, if not the best player at the time in that Premier League. And usually when you get someone like that, a certain club by the name of Real Madrid come a knocking, come a sniffing, and they usually get their guys, even if they have to wait and wait and wait, like they did recently with Kylian Mbappe. They eventually get their guy. And I'll never forget, I was actually in Madrid on a school field trip, aging myself again. Doing that, we went on a tour at the Santiago Bernabeu, and people outside were already printing shirts for Cristiano Ronaldo. And I remember, as I said, as a United supporter, I was absolutely heartbroken. It was also the Summer Olympics, Usain Bolt doing Usain Bolt things. Being a Jamaican, I was very happy, but I was in the corner just praying, please don't leave Manchester United. And at least for that summer, he didn't leave. He decided to at least stay, Rob. What happened? How did he arrive to that decision?
So that 2007-8 season was when he really, it was probably, I think in terms of goals, was his most successful season. He became this kind of superstar, won the Ballon d'Or for that season. 2008, he wins the Champions League with United, scores a great goal in the final against Chelsea, misses the penalty in the shootout, but then gets bailed out by his teammates, wins the Champions League in the pouring rain in Moscow. Around that game, there was speculation, wasn't there, that could be his last game, that Real Madrid was sniffing around, he wanted to go. In the end, he basically did a deal with Fergie, and they agreed to stay for one more year. I think after the 2008 Champions League final, he said, didn't he, I'm staying for one more year, basically. And then played that 2008, 2009. I think probably he saw the potential maybe of that Man United team, because they were at that time the best team in Europe. They went on in 2009 to reach another Champions League final where they were beaten relatively comfortably by Barcelona and his rival Lionel Messi, who scores a header in that final against in Rome, and that's his last game for Man United. And I think for a long time during that last season, that everyone at Man United knew. There's the stories that staff tell at the time, that even sort of February, March time, that Ronaldo was telling people openly, you can have my car when I'm going because I'm going to Real Madrid in the summer. It was that kind of an open secret. Yeah. United did quite well to get a world record fee for him at the time, but it was a massive loss. I think when it came to Man United, there was always, when he reached that level of kind of superstardom, you mentioned it there, that you can't really say no to Real Madrid. I think everyone at United knew that when Real Madrid really came calling with a really serious offer, that it was always going to happen. It was about how to manage that. They got as many good years out of Ronaldo as possible. But in 2009, he wanted to go. United couldn't hold on to him any longer, and he went.
I remember that summer, 2008. I know you said that after the Champions League final, he said he was going to stay, but the day after that, for the next 6-7 weeks, it was a saga, because Ronaldo might have said he was staying, but he was telling everybody else he was leaving. And it was just, I remember being I was in South Africa on the summer tour that year. So obviously Ronaldo missed it because he played the Euros with Portugal that summer. And every single press conference, Cape Town, Johannesburg, Durban, Ferguson was asked about Ronaldo. And it was a constant. The United signed Dimitar Berbatov that summer, but you wouldn't know about it because it was all about Ronaldo. So it became a distraction, and it did hang over United, and it became this problem whereby I think when United went to Japan for the Club World Cup back in the December, Ferguson was asked again about it. He just can't.
Was it about you?
No.
Same people again.
I wasn't there this time. Every press conference was about Real Madrid, and this was when Ferguson came out with his classic quote, "I wouldn't sell that mob a virus." He said, having 6 months, and then he obviously sold Real Madrid for £80 million. So, yeah, it was always going to happen. And Ronaldo, that summer, he let himself down a little bit by some of the things he said about how he was treated by the contract situation. I think he used the word he felt like a slave at times, which is ridiculous, and it didn't help, the fact that he was using this sort of language. But it was obvious it was going to go, and in the end, he went within days of the Champions League final in Rome, and £80 million world record fee, all paid up front, and that's when United's problems started.
That's when United's problems started, indeed. All right, well, like I said, usually when Real Madrid do come knocking, they end up getting their man, and that's exactly what they did with Cristiano Ronaldo. We'll be talking about his time there with Los Blancos after this short break. Right now, it's time to talk about Cristiano Ronaldo at Real Madrid, where it was the club that he stayed at the longest. Even though a lot of us, myself included, still picture him at Manchester United, Real Madrid is really where he became legendary, one could say. And we've got Gab Marcotti and Graham Hunters, two of the leading voices in European football, joining us, as well as Rodrigo Faiz, who is our ESPN Real Madrid correspondent, joining us from Madrid as well. Cannot wait to hear all of you guys' story. But Gab, we were talking about Cristiano Ronaldo at Manchester United. And usually, even though United are United, especially at the time that he was there, when a club like Real Madrid come knocking, it's hard to say no. Eventually, he did put pen to paper there, but how exactly did it happen from the Madrid perspective?
Well, I mean, I think they've been working on this for a long time via, obviously, his agent at the time, Jorge Mendes, who had a close relationship with Manchester United. Manchester United, ever so grateful to him for taking him to Old Trafford. Let's not forget, when he moved from Sporting Lisbon to Manchester United, Sporting had already signed a deal to take him to Parma. So Jorge Mendes had engineered all that. United were very grateful. But it was obvious at that stage that Real Madrid were determined to get him. It was obvious that Real Madrid were willing to spend a lot of money to get him. You'll remember also, and we're going back really to the 2007-08 season. That was a campaign where things weren't necessarily going great for Real Madrid. And there was this sort of constant drumbeat of Cristiano. And I think I don't think it's giving any secrets here. This is when Cristiano really started saying, all right, I want to jump on this bandwagon now. I want to get a move. He still felt a lot of sense of loyalty to Sir Alex Ferguson, of course. I remember being at the Champions League final in Moscow in 2008, Chelsea against Manchester United. Manchester United had won the Champions League and against Chelsea on penalties. I'll remember John Terry there. And I think there was a sense, okay, I've delivered, another Champions League final, or delivered a Champions League to Manchester United. Maybe this is the chance. Maybe this is the summer where we can get the deal done. And Cristiano stopped in the mix zone. I was with a guy who would become one of his biographers, Guillaume Balaguer, and he stopped and he talked for a long time. And Guillaume, at the time, worked for a high-profile Spanish radio show, and he just handed his cell phone over to Cristiano over the mix zone barrier, and Cristiano just allowed himself to be interviewed by these people and in the studio in Madrid. I mean, such is the lore of Real Madrid, such is the heft of Real Madrid, that you've got Cristiano willing to do this. And it was pretty clear that at that moment, this is what he wanted. Now, famously that summer, he was able to work something out with the club, or the club was work something out with him. If you remember, Manchester United actually made an announcement, which you wouldn't expect, saying Cristiano Ronaldo is staying at Manchester United, as if, he needed to say that. But unspoken in that was an agreement that, in a year's time, it would be different. And of course, a year later, for a then world record fee, he finally got his move to the Bernabeu.
He did indeed. And that's where we go next to talk about that unveiling, which happened in front of about 80,000 fans at the Bernabeu. And it was absolute pandemonium. Talks about how it eclipsed Diego Maradona's unveiling at Napoli back in 1984. Two very different times. Look at Gab. I know he has a thing to say about that, but we will definitely get to that. But just have a listen at the absolute pandemonium that was the Bernabeu that day.
Vamos. 1, 2, 3.
It was great. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. Alexis, it was a great day. It was a massive day. I don't remember any revolution like that, even much higher than Kylian Mbappe's premiere, because, all the people were talking about Cristiano Ronaldo for the last 3 years before joining Santiago Bernabeu or Real Madrid in 2009. But, that 6th of July, all the city wanted to be at the Santiago Bernabeu with more than 85,000 people, as you mentioned, Alexis. Even I remember that, even Florentino Perez just got in his second era that day. And all the people around Florentino Perez they were like, we want to be there. And he ran out of tickets for all the people that wanted to stay at Real Madrid. That was really a special day. I remember Eusebio, Portuguese legend, and Alfredo Di Stefano, Argentinian and Real Madrid legend, tried to be on stage with Florentino and with Cristiano Ronaldo and his famous A la Madrid. That was brilliant. Even I get a personal story because I was trying to go out with a girl by that time, and that was one of my first jobs at the Punto radio station in Spain that now disappeared some years ago. But that time you didn't need the like now that you needed an access, an ID, and La Liga to give the thumbs up to get the access to Real Madrid stadium. But that time, you only sent one email and you said, okay, I'm going to be there with whoever. And I remember that I told that girl if she wanted to be with me at the Santiago Bernabeu, and she thought that we were going to be on the stands because, there were no tickets for the stands. And when we got at the pitch side, she was like, what the hell? We were so lucky. And she was in tears crying for Cristiano Ronaldo with so many reporters and big journalists around, big names, really famous people around Cristiano Ronaldo. And even, it was so special that at the end of the night, I was imagining myself like, okay, I can get her for dinner and try to go out with her. And suddenly she said, okay, let's shake hands and I'm going to call you tomorrow. But thank you very much because this has been one of my most special days in my life. And I was like, okay, perfect. This is what Cristiano Ronaldo reflects on the people, that you think that you're going to get something huge, but finally you're going to be alone.
Cristiano Ronaldo making dates happen since that very much day. Graham, let me go to you because it was such an unveiling that clearly everybody remembers exactly where they were at that time. What about for you? What memory stands out for you from that absolutely historic day?
I'd been there all day, and unlike Rodri, I only brought my sardonic sense of humor and my work ethic. Rolled with me to support me, to love me, to care, and at least my work ethic, my sense of humor phoned me the next day. I don't know what Rodri's intended. It was an early evening beginning, so the tens of thousands of people had sat around the old Santiago Bernabeu, which was shaped like a castle. It was astonishing, the scenes, and maybe some of them had a little bit of wine with them. Some of them had cañas. So by the time they got into the ceremony, and the ceremony took a long time, gradually people in the stands noticed that there wasn't so much security. And then one guy jumped on, the next guy jumped on. Then there was a sea of people wanting to touch the hem. Initially, I thought it was people running to try and touch Rodri and feel his greatness. Instead, it turned out it was another R. It was Cristiano Ronaldo. And it will live with me forever that what happened was Florentino and his directors who were on the podium were like, lads, scatter. We need to move. And only Cristiano Ronaldo turned and stopped and saw the great man, Alfredo Di Stefano, who by then was a little bit unsteady on his legs, had sticks, And he stopped, and in the face of all these people running towards him, he just took the old man, arm around him, escorted him off like a leader, and his move to Real Madrid and the intention that he brought to Real Madrid, as Rodri was saying, for my taste, began there.
I agree. I think it's just remembering those scenes. He had already pretty much cemented icon status at a club that already has so many and had so many icons at that time. Rodri, I'm sure the people are going to be wondering, you're definitely not still dating that girl.
No way. I didn't see her again, to be honest. So,
Well, I think, Alexis, what he's not telling us is the girl's name. The girl's name is Irina Shayk. And the reason he stopped dating her is that he started dating Cristiano a little bit after that.
no way.
I run it too. It was Alex Ferguson who phoned her and said, "No, I said you could go with Roger, but it's another 20 years. I'm sorry, huh?"
Alex Ferguson was a legend, definitely.
I think she actually found out that Rodri actually supports Sporting de Gijón, and she realized she wanted to support some real winners. Whoa! On that note, let's move on now back to Cristiano Ronaldo, because in his first season, he had already amassed a club record of, Real Madrid amassed 96 La Liga points. That was a club record. He had 33 goals in 35 games. So pretty much delivering exactly what we expected Cristiano Ronaldo to deliver coming from Manchester United, Gab. But it was a trophy-less first season. What stood out to you that first season watching him at Real Madrid?
Well, I think the remarkable thing of that first season is Cristiano was basically the cherry on top of what to this day is the single biggest summer transfer campaign in history. I mean, once you adjust for inflation or whatever, just in terms of name, just to remind you who arrived that summer, before Cristiano, it was Kaká, who arrived for an enormous fee, I think something in the region of 80 million euros. It was Karim Benzema, who would, of course, go on to achieve a thing or two at the Bernabeu himself. It was Xabi Alonso. It was Raúl Albiol. And of course, most importantly, it was Alvaro Arbeloa. No, I'm just kidding. But it was, I don't know if I forgot anybody, but when you add it up, even in today's money, you're looking somewhere north of 300 million. And 300 million in 2009, adjusted for inflation, is a lot more money today. Nobody has ever come close to that. And they assembled all of this for a coach who would get the club's record points total and yet only last one season. Pellegrini, of course, which to this day is still pretty mind-blowing.
It is pretty mind-blowing. Rodri, what about for you, everyone there in Madrid? Because, of course, you would have lived through that first season too. And as Gab was saying, it was such a big money transfer. And it's something that, we expect today, that when clubs are willing to shell out all this cash for a player, they want instant results. And the fact that, you can get all that, but still go trophy-less that season. How did the people pretty much react to Cristiano's first season there?
Well, people were quite happy with Cristiano Ronaldo's performance, but he was frustrated, definitely.
Yeah.
First of all, because he wasn't with the number 7 at the back, because by that time, Raúl was the number 7 and he was still the captain of Real Madrid. And secondly, because he thought that, after that spending, that investment, he thought that, oh my God, this is not enough. We got, indeed, myself, Cristiano Ronaldo, we got Benzema, who was a great youngster for what Real Madrid needed. They got so many, the names that just Gabi said. And for him, he was like, this is not enough. We need something else. And, Manuel Pellegrini, I think he was on the bench. He was even not enough for what Real Madrid and indeed Cristiano Ronaldo needed by that time, because they were facing FC Barcelona. That by that time was massive, was great, was one of the best teams I've ever seen in my life. And after so many years, they admitted that they couldn't see any team playing better than that FC Barcelona in those 3 years with and after Pep Guardiola. But, he was frustrated, definitely. I get a source at Real Madrid that was at that time at the board, and he's still at the board, that says that he remembers one chat with Cristiano Ronaldo after a Clásico, and Cristiano Ronaldo was complaining about the Sporting direction. He said literally that they needed something else, maybe not signings, but something or someone else for the bench, trying to tell Florentino that they needed someone like Mourinho on the bench that try to get on Pep Guardiola's or FC Barcelona players' nerves.
Well, you mentioned it there. I mean, when Real Madrid splash some cash and get someone like Cristiano Ronaldo, they can get a club record in points as well, but still go trophyless, eventually sack the manager. And it could only be that they would lose to what was, as Rodri said, probably the best Barcelona team that we have seen. And usually, whether you like it or not, if we're mentioning a Cristiano Ronaldo, we have to mention a Lionel Messi, because that is when the era of the Ronaldo versus Messi debate has started. And here we still are talking about it, even though they're on two separate continents. But we had them both, Graham, in the same league at that time, with the two clubs that consider each other as their biggest rivals. What do you remember from when you were covering La Liga then? Was that first moment that you realized that this is it? This is the era. When you think Real Madrid, you think Ronaldo. And when you think Barcelona, you think Messi. And these two are going to be pretty much the talk of the town for years to come.
I think the spark actually began, in my humble opinion, in the Ballon d'Or podium where Kaká won, and I think Messi was second and Ronaldo was third, and it was young Messi. There's a fabulous picture of Cristiano Ronaldo looking across, not at the winner, but at Messi, and it feels like Cristiano's chewing a wasp. He's so unhappy. There are daggers coming out of his eyes. And I would contend that that first season, when the Clásicos were narrow and the key figures were Zlatan in one and Pedro Rodriguez in another, that the actual spark of the build-up to who will dominate the Clásicos, who is the better footballer, that was a slow bubble. And then it began to grow and grow, I would say, one, with Messi reacting. He loves a stimulus. If you poke him, he will come out looking to punch you. And albeit that he affected not to care, and it was demonstrably obvious that Cristiano wanted to be known as the boss of the Madrid squad. He had been telling Walter Di Salvo, the Italian fitness coach who was at Manchester United and then at Real Madrid, for years, I will become the greatest player in history. Not of my era, not greater than Messi. And that was a thing that when he was saying at Manchester United, people looked at him askance, say, yeah, good, but the all-time player. But he believed it. And then suddenly, not only was Leo Messi in his way, but they were in the same league. They would bump noses in the Clásico. And it was truly the following season when it went out of proportion. There was a catalytic impact of Mourinho's arrival, his tactics of scorched earth at the time, him talking up Cristiano over Messi, the way in which they would grow the grass longer at the Bernabeu. Barcelona were coming so that the ball wouldn't move well. The first Clásico ends with, whether you want to call it a Messi masterclass, it's 5-0. They go toe-to-toe. You can see Cristiano Ronaldo going crazy. In the semi-final of the Champions League in 2010, that's when you see, of 2011, you see Mourinho's instructions to hold and try to dominate Barcelona via defending, and Cristiano Ronaldo waving the rest of his team forward, literally on the pitch, ignore the coach's instructions, come on. In 2010-11, for my taste, that's when it became all-consuming and fodder for us, fodder for the ESPN fans who are watching this, fodder for all of us to try and describe, to get under the skin of it, and to savor it, because it's one of the great footballing battles in the history of our sport.
Gab, what did you remember of the early days of the Ronaldo versus Messi saga that really came to fruition in La Liga?
I mean, obviously, Graham mentioned it there, the Manita, the 5-0, which I think really kind of set the tone. It's what I find fascinating about this is that you had all these characters who kind of came into place. Obviously, Cristiano and Messi were the two major ones, but obviously you have the enduring centuries-old rivalry between Barcelona and Real Madrid, and all the layers, the cultural, social, historical layers that go along with it. And then you had Mourinho arriving in there, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, the relationship between Mourinho and Cristiano over the years. Obviously both Portuguese, both the same agent. it would really evolve. It would have high points. It would have low points. But the fact that you had Mourinho juxtaposed with Pep Guardiola, who, at the time was something like, it was as if people, he had reinvented football. That's the way those of us who narrate the game in the media, it's the way we talk about it, with a combination of possession and pressing and terms like tiki-taka, which now seem passé, but at the time people were constantly going on about. I just pose such a fierce contrast to the football of Real Madrid and the interpretation that Mourinho put together. And I think this is often overlooked because, even the Cristiano's biggest fans will say that he's a diva, right? Which, I think he would say that. However, I've had the opportunity to speak about this with people who were Real Madrid at the time, such as Xabi Alonso, for example, that he was able to build out of this sort of Galactico team, and Galactico being a term that goes back to Florentino's first term, but which is very much part of the ethos, the showbiz, which is this team of soloists, right? He was able to mold that into a real unit, like a genuine group, despite the fact that you're adding all these people as if they were like, Panini stickers. And Cristiano became a part of that. And it's easy to forget now when people joke and penando and whatever. And like, I'm not suggesting that Cristiano Ronaldo turned into Park Ji-sung and he was running himself into the ground and whatever. But he really was, I don't know if the boys agree with me, but in that period, he was the soloist who played with the orchestra, very much so. And I think there was a moment of self-denial where everybody at Real Madrid, including Cristiano, bought into the Mourinho siege mentality and everything. Certainly for the first two seasons. Obviously, season number 3, the locura of Mourinho takes over and it all goes down the toilet. And leaves a lot of really, really bad blood. But for those first 2 seasons, Cristiano said, yeah, I will deny myself to be a part of this. And I think it's something which, again, often gets forgotten, but I think he deserves a lot of credit for it.
I don't want to fast forward now, Rodri, to Jose Mourinho's final season at Real Madrid, because as Gab said, they shared a lot of highs, but when the lows came, they were very low, and it left a lot of bad blood, and it kind of left everybody wondering, where did it all go wrong? Because it seemed like a match made in heaven, both sharing the same agent, both being Portuguese, both seemingly on the same page in the first couple of seasons, but then it all started to fall apart. Where did it happen, and how did it happen?
Well, first of all, I think that they suffered the erosion of the press with a lot of pressure and many polemics, in the newspapers. Secondly, I think that, both characters were, at their top level, because both are still winners. And when everything or everyone expected that they were going to be, close friends because they shared George Mendes as an agent, they were Portuguese. At the end of the day, I think Mourinho lost the plot completely. He was so obsessed with what Barca were doing with Pep Guardiola. And then at the same time, Cristiano Ronaldo was obsessed with what Leo Messi was doing. They were like, okay, I want to work for myself and I want to work for myself. And then in the locker room, when you are trying to get your best individually, you crash with the collective spirit of the team. And that is where, I think that it was more, for me, more Jose Mourinho's fault rather than Cristiano's, because at the end of the day, Cristiano wanted to score more goals than Leo Messi, to be the Pichichi, the main scorer of La Liga, but he wanted to win. And that is the key of everything. And at that season, I think that Mourinho just wanted to be better than Pep Guardiola, no matter what he won or no matter how he won. And, that pressure, that erosion with all the press on them, I think that, it got to a point in which Florentino had to choose in between Jose Mourinho or Cristiano Ronaldo. And I think that Florentino Perez was really intelligent, saying that, okay, maybe this squad could be managed by, for example, Carlo Ancelotti, that he's more than a peacemaker rather than what Jose Mourinho was doing. And I think it could be better. And I think that he did it well because, Cristiano Ronaldo, Sergio Ramos, Iker Casillas, who, I mean, doesn't really matter the names that were at the squad, but that time they were like more relaxed, more calm, because, the rage and the anger inside that squad, in between even Real Madrid players, was too high, too much for what they needed to win.
Graham, you seem to agree that it was mainly on Jose.
I just want to. There's a lovely pass there from Rodri, and I pick it up because the way that we can, because your question, let's just open it up to the ups and downs across the entire relationship. Jose Mourinho, for all his qualities, lost himself in his own lust for money, wages, and payoffs. His ego confused himself. He got lost in his willingness to poke at people and cause fights. And for all Cristiano Ronaldo's little peccadillos, I think, as Rodri was saying, for him, even if, like Gabe says, might be a diva, might spend a lot of time on how he looks, spends a lot on people protecting his win. Win. I don't think he's ever lost the focus about, I want to win. And Mourinho has, patently has. That's not now the number one thing. And as that became apparent to the two men, they distanced themselves. And the nastiest point in the relationship, as far as I'm concerned, is Mourinho saying, well, I coached the real Ronaldo. Now, Ronaldo Nassr was a better footballer than Cristiano Ronaldo. His knee wasn't as strong, and his trophies don't say it, but he was. And Mourinho knew the thing that would hurt Cristiano Ronaldo most and said it in public. And for my taste, that says an awful lot about the special ones.
That indeed. Well, with Jose Mourinho out the door, in came the very calming influence of one of my absolute favorites, and that is Carlo Ancelotti. Now, Gab, it's not often that we associate Italians with calming influences and blood, but that is something that Carlo definitely brought. We do know that they have the fiery side as well. Very passionate, especially about football. But when Carlo came in, so did Gareth Bale, who signed from Spurs. That was another big money signing as well. Karim Benzema also came into the forefront. And together with Cristiano Ronaldo, they formed BBC. And that definitely reaped a lot of rewards. It was a good time for Cristiano under Ancelotti as well. They had gotten Champions League glory again. He had won back-to-back Ballon d'Ors. So what was it about Carlo Ancelotti that got that Benzema, Bale, Cristiano Ronaldo trio working so well?
So I think there's a couple of things. One, Carlo Ancelotti, with his years at Milan, where he dealt with a lot of superstars, winning Champions League titles, winning 2 Champions League titles, losing 2 finals. He, and having been part of, obviously, having been a great player himself, I think he had a much better understanding of what makes sort of these high-level superstars tick. And he also made the transition from being a very dogmatic coach, as he was early on, influenced by Arrigo Sacchi, to being much more of a pragmatist, right? What buttons do I need to push with this guy? I coined the term galactical whisperer for him. But I think it's true, because I don't think you're going to find many people. You can probably count on one hand the number of people who worked under Carlo Ancelotti who say, I don't like him. He's not a good coach. He's not a good person. In fact, I can only think of one person right now. Maybe there are others, but not many. And certainly none of these guys from Cristiano on down, as you saw it when Ancelotti was ultimately let go. He had the challenge there. It's hard to, when we talk about the assembling of the BBC, right? Let's not forget kind of the context with it, right? Karim Benzema at the beginning, under Mourinho, was kind of alternating with El Pipita, Gonzalo Higuain, and very different types of players. A lot of debate about who the right guy was. We know where Mourinho was, because if you remember, when Higuain got hurt, even though he was alternating them, he said, oh, normally you like to go hunting with a dog. Now I have to go hunting with a cat. Benzema supposedly being the cat. And then Gareth Bale comes in for an enormous fee. And if you remember again, officially the story that came out, I don't know if it's true, maybe the boys have a view on this, is that Real Madrid purposely made it appear as if the Gareth Bale would see was slightly lower than Cristiano's, so as not to mess with Cristiano's ego. But the reality, again, you had another guy coming in, phenomenal athlete, phenomenal footballer, but a guy who was kind of used to playing on his own. So how do you balance those three people? Again, history says, oh, it's because Karim Benzema worked so hard and he became a 9 and a 10 at once, and he got Bale and Cristiano to work together. I think he definitely got Cristiano on board. And I think that's when Cristiano understood, okay, there's three of us on here. In the real world, Cristiano can look across the pitch and say, Gareth Bale doesn't do much off the ball defensively. He's not much for tactical discipline. A bit like me. Okay, that's fine. We're both superstars. Can we carry two superstars who don't do that? Weirdly, they're kind of having this same debate now in Madrid with Mbappe and Vini, right? History repeating itself. And I think what Cristiano did is he leaned heavily in Benzema. He worked on the rapport with Benzema. How can I help Benzema? How can Benzema help me? And I think Ancelotti really facilitated that. And again, easy to forget. He wins the Champions League title in the first year, 2013-14. How does Florentino reward him after that? He says, let's make this team even more unbalanced. Let me move Xabi Alonso on, who would be reunited, of course, with Pep Guardiola and Bayern. And let me replace Xabi Alonso with who? With another hardworking, smart defensive midfielder? No, let me move him with the guy who only does one thing. The guy who has one skill in his life, two skills, but he's also handsome. James Rodriguez. So James Rodriguez drops in. James Rodriguez, who is, about as quick as a pile of rocks, who does no work off the ball. And then again, Carleto has to try to make this work again. And it's...
the bad thing of all, Gab, yeah. Sorry for disturbing you. I was covering Brazil World Cup at that time, and I interviewed James Rodriguez after Colombia and Uruguay game. He scored an amazing goal. It was maybe the second or the third great goal at that time. And I asked James, would you like to play in Spain, in La Liga, maybe Real Madrid, Barcelona? And he answered, I would be loved to play for Real Madrid. And by that time, Cadena Cope, which is the most important radio station in Spain, asked me for the recording, and they sent it to Florentino Perez. And Florentino Perez was like, did he really said this after the game? And they were like, yes. And he was like, okay, give me 1 second. And the following day, Florentino Perez was calling James Rodriguez's agent, who was George Mendes. That was how Florentino Perez got a signing. I mean, that was nonsense.
But yeah, no, it gives you a sense of what was going on.
Sure.
And Cristiano had to function amidst this. And, again, Carlo Ancelotti gets all the credit and the other hardworking players. But Cristiano had to slot and he had to adjust. And I think this is also something that he did. And Benzema, phenomenal footballer, phenomenal attitude. But it takes two to make it work. And it was Benzema and Cristiano made it work.
Small point to support that. Don't forget that when Bale comes in at the last minute, and Carlo is working hard about how to make this BBC thing work, and he puts Bale at centre forward in the first Clasico.
Yes.
They know they have to get Di Maria in. And they take Di Maria out of the front three and make him not only a functioning midfielder, but he plays superbly that season. I think it's him crossing from midfield, left midfield, for the goal in the cup final, the Copa del Rey final, one of the great Cristiano goals. So I just want to support the lads in saying that the Ancelotti and Paul Clement idea about how do we do this is a work of art in man management and tactical terms. Okay, the quality, if you get the quality oozing, will win you the bet, but it was super clever.
We're going to have a podcast on Carleto soon because, we do love us some Carleto, don't we? And that's probably the reason why he's back at Real Madrid doing absolute bits. But back to Cristiano now. I just want to fast forward to the 2015-2016 season. Another good one for Cristiano. He became Real Madrid's all-time leading goal scorer, surpassing the great Raul. Eventually, when he left Real Madrid, he had scored 450 goals in just 438 games. That is still a stunning number. That's more than a goal per game. And my question is, Graham, let me come to you first on this one is, can anyone surpass this number now?
Well, it would be just infantile of me to say no, because what all sport consistently teaches us is that sooner or later, a special man or woman comes along. good luck to you. Will I be alive when that happens? No. It's a genuinely extraordinary total. If you look at the types of men that he overtook, not Raul, but if you look at the longer ago guys, how durable their records were. Football keeps evolving. It's certainly now a more attacking game, or it's a one where it's more open for all the strategizing. When I was growing up, I'm the oldest of the panel. If a striker, a really good striker, was scoring one every 2 games, generally that was regarded as pretty special. And there were outliers like the Swedes at Milan in the 50s. You can pick outliers, but do they go on for as long as Cristiano? No. So could it feasibly possibly happen? I will say to you, it could, but it will be a very, very, very long time. And damn it, I'd love to see the person who achieves it. Now, so a tiny little anecdote. I was sent to report on Cristiano scoring his 100th Champions League goal against CSK Moscow, I think, and we had access after the game to him, but not before the game. So the producer and I went down to the centre of Madrid and got a time-lapse film of one of these guys that do the caricatures. So we brought that, and we were in this special part of the flash zone after the game where he'd scored and his records were beginning to burgeon. And the producer just held it out as we were filming as he walked up. And he walked up and he looked at it. Brilliant sense of humor. He said, I'm not that ugly, am I? Took it, signed it, handed it back, did the interview. Okay, very funny, very witty. And he was smiling and enjoying it. I didn't see him personally until 4 years later in the UEFA Gala when he was winning Player of the Year. And I had an interview backstage with him. And he walked up, he'd just taken the garlands and the applause. And he walked back up, dead poker face, and said, still not ugly, and got on the interview. And that might not be world-class humor, but I think he's very rarely given credit for the fact that there is wit and sparkle added to his ruthless determination to knock all goal scorers out of the way.
I would have loved to know what he thought of that first statue that was built of him, but thankfully it got fixed. But Rodri, I want to talk about, as Graham mentioned it there, that he was covering, his Champions League exploits as well. And we say this all the time. We still say it to this day. They are the reigning champions for a reason. There's something about Real Madrid and the Champions League, but there was also something about Cristiano Ronaldo and the Champions League. 105 goals in 101 games. Again, more than a goal per game for this man. What stood out to you watching him in the Champions League that showed that he had that mentality that now we've come to identify with Real Madrid?
I think the mentality in Cristiano Ronaldo is unique because when you were asking now, Graham, if you can find any other Cristiano Ronaldo on Real Madrid history, talking about the numbers, I mean, indeed, you can get any future player with maybe not the same numbers, but something different, but something similar. But the way that Cristiano Ronaldo was behaving after the games, before the games, you knew perfectly that he was born to win the Champions League. I remember one time, he was with Rafa Benitez on the bench. Rafa Benitez was maybe 4 months on Real Madrid bench. And I remember that Real Madrid were facing Dynamo Kiev in Lviv. They were in war, so they had to play Dynamo Kiev home games in Lviv. And I remember that, since, at that time I was working for Gol Televisión and beIN Sports, and I was behind a door. Since we were right holders, I was able to be there. And Real Madrid ended the training session the day before the game. And I was behind the door, trying to get my phone, some notes. And I heard Cristiano Ronaldo and Rafa Benitez. And I remember that they were, the field was great. So many screamings in between both of them. And I was like, behind the door, like, okay, don't even move. Because if they realize that you are here, you're going to be kicked out of the stadium. And I was like this. And suddenly, I remember, one sentence that from Cristiano Ronaldo to Rafa Benitez that, stick in my mind up to date. And he was like, please, Rafa, don't tell me how to win the Champions League because I know it perfectly. I dream of winning another title every single year. And if you want to win with Real Madrid, please do whatever I am saying. And Rafa Benitez was like, I also won with Liverpool, one final. And he was like, no, it's not the same because this is Real Madrid. And this is the way we win in Real Madrid. Please take care of my advice because if not, you're going to be out in 1 month. And he was out in 1 month.
He was out midway through the season. Gab, you love the bit of that story, but it's rare that we could almost appreciate a player talking like that to the manager because nowadays, or most days, it's frowned upon.
I think historically it was probably more frowned upon than it is now, to be honest. Because the reality is there's many more managers than there are superstars. And, we haven't mentioned him yet, but the guy who took over and won more Champions League titles with Real Madrid, obviously one of the greatest midfielders in history, but few people could have seen him be a top coach. And I'm talking about Zinedine Zidane, right? Because he was not a guy who spoke very often. He was a guy who sometimes was prone to losing his head, as my good friend Marco Materazzi knows.
Very well.
He did not.
Losing or using?
Yeah, both in this case. If I were really unkind, I might say costing his country a World Cup in his final game, but that's a whole other thing. So it did not seem like a natural fit, especially also he played with some of these guys or whatever. But I think, and maybe this is where the difference is with Rafa Benitez, right? I remember talking to Ancelotti about this later when he was at Bayern. I said, are you surprised that Zidane has done so well? Because, he was your assistant for a while, but, viewed from the outside, he does not seem like, he's got charisma, obviously, but in terms of talking. And he says, look, he doesn't talk very often, but when he does, people listen. And it genuinely makes a difference. Two people can give you the same level of advice or the same indication. But if he does it and somebody else does, you're more prone to listen to Zidane. And I think that was part of the success, and that is part of what Rafa Benitez struggled with, because, look, Ronaldo owns a television too, right? He knows Rafa Benitez didn't win that title. He knows Milan lost that title. They were 3-0 up at halftime. And I think, whereas he knows what Zidane did on the pitch, he knows enough about history and stuff. And so it formed that relationships. I think the fact that Zidane had been Ancelotti's assistant and maybe took some of the man management from Ancelotti, I think that is kind of why it extended his era at the top at Real Madrid. For me, generally, after the Benitez thing, Zidane comes in, I was thinking to myself, all right, is Cristiano going to move on now? Is it all going to fall apart at Real Madrid? I had very little faith in Zinedine Zidane, and he proved me wrong.
Small point. He was the only one, or the first one, to ever persuade Cristiano that occasionally being on the bench was good for him. And it was a thorny, even for Zizou, with his ability that Gabe's talking about to talk genius to genius, superstar to superstar. I remember him taking Cristiano Ronaldo off at Las Palmas when Madrid 3-1 up. It looked the perfect scenario. And trust was being built because Cristiano didn't like being off the pitch, not just for personal goal totals, but we must win, we must win. It goes to 3-3. Again, it's that Cristiano Ronaldo chewing a wasp face. So furious. But he continues to buy into Zizou's idea. He continues to take mini breaks, mini rests. And as such, at that time, when, as Gabe says, they were winning even more Champions League than under Carlo Ancelotti, that was, it's a minuscule thing on the radar of history. But at the time, it was huge. And again, few people other than Zidane could have convinced Cristiano that it was for his good.
If it's one thing we know, Cristiano Ronaldo tended to respect a lot more the manager, is that he could track exactly what they did on the pitch and kind of shared similar levels of success, which is probably why Ralph Rangnick Gates happened. But that's a little bit in the future. Still want to talk about his time at Real Madrid, but as it came to an end, Rodri, and I'm going to come to you in this one because we talked about how he did also reap a lot of fruits under Zizou. 3 consecutive Champions League. After that final, though, in Kiev against Liverpool was probably the first little hints that we started getting of him showing doubt about his future at Real Madrid. He was talking about them in the past tense. And Zidane eventually stepped down after that win. What was the bigger factor, though, in Cristiano Ronaldo deciding to leave the Bernabeu? Was it that Zidane had left, or was it a breakdown in his relationship with Florentino?
I think it was more his relationship with Florentino, because he had some problems with the Spanish Hacienda, and he wanted Florentino to pay for that. He was like, okay, I'm the main guy on the squad, so pay for this. And Florentino, I think intelligent, he said that, okay, if I pay for your debts or your failures or whatever, all the players are going to ask me for that again. So, I don't want to do this. And then he said, okay, so if you don't pay for this, I'm going to leave. And he was like, okay, leave. This is Real Madrid. Now one is going to be higher than the club. And he left. The thing is that we never expected that he was going to leave that year. I remember that, I was the Champions League reporter for the right holder in Spain. And I remember that year, that season, I interviewed him 3 times. And those 3 times, I always asked him about if he was going to renew his contract to Real Madrid. And the 3 times he was like, no, I'm happy like that. I'm happy like that. And I thought that he was lying to me, since all the players never said anything like that in public. But he was like, no, I'm happy with that. I'm happy with my contract. And I was like, you sure? You want me to speak to Florentino Perez, trying to make fun of this? And he was like, no, I'm happy. And then we got to the point where Real Madrid won Liverpool. We know perfectly what happened then, with Sergio Ramos, Mo Salah, with Gareth Bale scoring 2 goals, with Karius making his worst performance ever. And when I was in Kiev that night, like hours before the game, I texted one of Cristiano Ronaldo's agents. And the kind of normal questions that all the journalists we make these guys. Is Cristiano Ronaldo in fit, in shape? Has he? And he was like, he wants to talk to you after the game. So I got a bit surprised, but I thought that he was going to say that he was going to renew his contract to Real Madrid. But after the game, all the people were to get Gareth Bale. And I was thinking about, Gareth Bale doesn't speak Spanish at all. He doesn't really like a Spanish person. So, I'm going to look for Cristiano Ronaldo. That he didn't perform really well. But when I turned back, he was already there. So, my question was, okay, you won again another Champions League title with Real Madrid. You got to keep winning with Real Madrid, with you on the front. And then he said, it has been a great time at Real Madrid, great memories, great year. And I was like, is this a farewell? And then he drinks water and he said, okay, I will speak about this in the following days, but yes. And all the people were so revolutioned, even the board. I heard, because I had one reporter at the palco in the stadium, and I heard some sentences from the Real Madrid board saying that, oh, no way, you can't say this now at this moment because we're trying to celebrate the title, and now he's thinking again about himself. And that is something that I think that Cristiano Ronaldo makes to be what he is, because he knows perfectly what message he wants to send out. He knows perfectly where to say that, and the time, the moment was key for him, because he never talked about that anymore.
I think, and Real Madrid may today deny it, but I think they were ready to move him actually the year before. It's not like this all came about because of his tax problems and whatever. There was a reality where Real Madrid is the strangest of clubs in the sense that, obviously they don't have an owner who puts in money if they lose money. So they have to break even or make money every year. And under Florentino, they generally do that. They became very aware of the fact that he was older and he wasn't performing to the level of his contract. Not just in terms of goals and games, or rather, they thought at some point he may not perform the level of his contract. And it's not just goals and games, but also commercially what he can bring. When you have a guy who is at a club for 9 years, as he was at the time, or 8 years, whatever it was, it's difficult to go and sell. It's a lot easier to go and sell, right, the next big thing commercially, right, than it is to go and say, oh, here's Cristiano again. Well, what has he done now? Is he better than a year ago? Is he better than 2 years ago? Probably not. He's maybe the same level. So I think they became aware that if they got into a contract extension, it's not like you can give them a pay cut, right? Because that's one of the ways people keep score. And I think that's one of the ways that Cristiano keeps score too. Not because he needs the money or wants the money, but because it's important to him it's a measure of your worth, right? So when he got wind via George Mendes that even the year before, they were ready to shop him around if the right situation arose, I think that really annoyed him. And that led to kind of the logical end that Rodri described there, saying like, if we leave, it's going to be me going on my terms rather than you guys trying to ship me out somewhere. He wanted to kind of take control of the situation.
He'd been giving hints himself in interviews prior to that brilliant moment with Rodri. He'd often said in public, yeah, look, if it wasn't for the weather, I'd go back to Manchester United. Because he felt he was treated differently there. And isn't it the epitome of business? Isn't it the epitome of business? Well, I had to say it. That if you have a depreciating asset, but you can still make capital from it, which they did, which they got from Juventus, argue about however you define that price. It's brilliant. And Real Madrid is the club of passion, because it genuinely is, but it's the club of absolutely zero sentiment for anybody once their worth is finished. Later on, for what you represent, for what you might become as an academy coach, or in Don Emilio Butragueño's role as a vice president, in the future, yeah, we'll kiss and make up. Right now, thank you, goodbye, the door is closed, see you, and we'll take 70, 80, 90, 100 million for a declining asset. I think people who aren't involved in that sport or our game might think it's horrible, but in another form, it's also brilliant.
And another point to add to what Graham and Gab are saying, we got to keep in mind that Cristiano Ronaldo was not a Florentino Perez signing. This is something that maybe no one knows, but it was Ramon Calderón's signings, because after Florentino Perez said, okay, I want to go back to Real Madrid presidency and whatever, he was at the premiere. He was the one to be with Cristiano Ronaldo that 6th of July of 2008 or 2009. I don't really remember the year. But, the signing, it was Ramon Calderón's, the former president of Real Madrid. And that is something that at the end of the day was like, it made Florentino Perez think about, okay, should I have to choose in between Gareth Bale or Cristiano Ronaldo? Okay, Cristiano Ronaldo is not mine, but Gareth Bale is 100% mine. So he wanted Gareth Bale to be the new Cristiano Ronaldo. We know what happened after, but that is why, another point to add to keep in mind.
Yeah, the smallest of anecdotes, which is really for Real Madrid fans, is at that time that Rodri's mentioned, when Ferguson says to Cristiano, you can't go, and Calderon has the deal set up for, as Gabe pointed out, exactly one season later. The vice president of Barcelona is still Ferran Soriano, who goes on to Manchester City. And he goes straight to Calderon at a match and says, player, you've dropped the ball, we're going to take him off you. And they went to Mendes and they went to Cristiano and said, we will pay you more. We'll pay Manchester United more. And not Mendes, but Ronaldo. Cristiano Ronaldo said, no, it's Real Madrid for me, and I've given my word.
You can feel that in the podcast.
Channeling your inner Laporta there.
Oh, loved it.
Channeling the inner me that you've known from day one.
Love that.
I've making into.
Well, pretty much that is how the love story between Cristiano Ronaldo and Real Madrid came to an end. And that also concludes this first part of our Cristiano Ronaldo two-part special of the Football Reporters. Thank you for joining us for this first part. We'll be back for the next part, where we will look at his time at Juventus, plus a return to Manchester United, and eventually, where he is right now, a move to the Saudi Pro League. So see us there. I'm Alexis Nunes, and I'm joined by Graham Hunter and Gab Marcotti, two of our biggest names in football, and Rodrigo Faiz, who is our Real Madrid correspondent over in Spain and has interviewed Cristiano Ronaldo himself quite a few times in some iconic moments. So let's get straight into it, guys. We talked about how the deterioration of his relationship at Real Madrid happened and eventually how he moved on to Turin. He was signed by Juventus for 112 million euros. It was a record transfer fee for a player who was over 30 years old, Gab. But for Juventus, who aren't exactly leading the way on how you should do spend finances wisely, this probably would have made a lot of people go, huh. But you know what? It's Cristiano Ronaldo, right? So talk to us about exactly how this happened, what Juventus were thinking, and what the reaction in Turin was like.
So I'll start with the positives first. The reaction was tremendous. People got genuinely excited. And why wouldn't you, right? You're getting a guy who's still one of the top two players in the world. You've bought into this line where you've been dominating Serie A, not winning the Champions League, and all of a sudden you've got a guy who's got, a whole bunch of Champions League titles at home in his trophy cabinet. You get a guy who's a winner. From the club's perspective, they also thought commercially Cristiano would give him a real boost as well, and undoubtedly he did. Everywhere Juventus went would become an event. Here you can see Cristiano in the flesh. Let's not forget, he'd been at Real Madrid for so long. Yeah, everybody sees Real Madrid, but you see Real Madrid on television, unless you're in Spain and you're playing in La Liga. Now, all of a sudden, he's potentially reaching a different audience. So that was the massive excitement behind it. Commercially, it did not work out. As you mentioned there, Juventus ended up making enormous losses, not just because of Cristiano, but between the transfer fee and his wages. He did take a pay cut compared to what he was earning at Real Madrid, but it was not a significant pay cut. And I think, in defense of the Juventus president, Andrea Agnelli, at the time, who orchestrated this whole thing, I think he was looking beyond that. He thought Cristiano puts you over the top to win the Champions League, right? But also, he was also thinking Super League as well. He was the head of the European Club Association at the time. And I think he was thinking, okay, in the Super League context, we're all going to have more money. Cristiano won't seem that expensive, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, Super League would end up blowing up in his face. He scored his goals in Serie A. Nobody's going to go and argue with that. It's just that Juventus didn't make any real progress in Europe. He left us with some memorable headed goals from the Champions League. The one against Atletico Madrid where, I think he jumps above the guy's head. He looked like he could have hurdled a car at that point. But he also left us at the very end, I think it was against Porto, with the other image, their elimination, when he's in the wall and he kind of turns his head away. And I think in some way that was Cristiano's arc at Juve. By the end, by the third season, it was obvious they're not going to renew his contract. They couldn't afford to. He looked around and he says, what am I doing here? And in Cristiano's defense, and we have to say this, he had 3 different coaches in the 3 years that he was there. And each was different and unsuited to Cristiano at that stage of his career in his own way. Brought in Maurizio Sarri, who has a very specific way of playing, but is also a very gruff character. Sarri's the guy who wants to play attacking football, played attacking football at Napoli. Sarri ball, played it early at Chelsea, and then realized, to win, I need to become more conservative. So he arrives there, becomes more conservative at Juve, and it doesn't work out. You had Andrea Pirlo, retired legend, Juve thinking, this is going to be like Zidane all over again. You'll listen to Pirlo, respects Pirlo. I'm sure he does, but Pirlo's idea of possession and pressing and movement, Cristiano's like, wait a minute, I'm Cristiano. Don't necessarily want to go and do this. The team didn't respond. Juve fans used to winning when they didn't get results, and they dominated games but didn't get results. People turned on the coach. Instability there. And then they turned back to Max Allegri in his third season, Mr. Pragmatism, Mr. Conservative. And then Cristiano's like, okay, this guy's a winner. He's won before, unlike the other two doofuses. But wait a minute. Why am I standing up here by myself? And you see this evolution in the way he plays, in the stats, in the numbers. Already, we didn't touch upon this, but by the end, Cristiano had gone from being sort of the high energy winger who'd run at people and beat them that he was in the first part of his career. He had become a center forward, right? He became physically bigger, stronger. At the end at Real Madrid, he scored a lot of goals that way because he was still quicker than most center backs and he was stronger than most wingers physically. So you could hit a high ball to him, you could head it, far post headers, all this stuff. The problem is, by that point at Juve, they said, okay, you want to play up front, Cristiano, fine. Everybody else back in the Allegri system, and then we'll figure out how to get the ball to Cristiano. So you'd receive the ball outside the box, and if you look at the number of shots he takes from outside the area, absolutely balloons in his time at Juve, because he gets the ball, and he's like, wait a minute, I've got the ball here, I'm outside the box, defenders are coming. If I lay it off to somebody and run into the area, I'll probably never get the ball back. I'm not quick enough. I can't go and beat three guys on my own like I used to, get closer to goal. I'll just belt it from here. And that tied into other things. That record, look, Cristiano was never exactly Juninho or Sinisa Mihailovic with his free kicks. But he scored some very important free kicks, including one for which I was there. Don't want to upset Rodri, but it was the 3-3 between Spain and Portugal. Scores a last minute thing. You were there too, Graham. But the reality is this is not his forte. And yet he went at one point where I didn't even know what the number was. It's something absurd, like 40, 50 free kicks in a row without scoring, often without coming close. And all of this created this aura of negativity around him. So I've gone too long, but those 3 years of Cristiano at Juve, they left such a bad legacy. It's not his fault, but a case study in how to spend an enormous amount on an asset, wrong place, wrong time, wrong president, and then you make things worse by putting the wrong pieces around him.
Graham, how would you evaluate Cristiano Ronaldo's time at Juventus? Because Gab kind of pretty much laid it all out there and said ultimately it was not his fault. He had 3 coaches that clearly were not for you. Wrong place, wrong time. You always have the price tag attached to you in a club which seriously has had financial problems and was having. And the main goal was to bring this superstar here to get Juve back to the heights of European football. Yes, he helped them win 2 Serie A titles, but ultimately they did not get that European glory that Juve believed they needed. So overall, would you say it was a failure, and whose fault was it then?
It depends entirely on the terms you want to define success and failure. Because, if you asked Juve fans now, would you take something approximating what you went through then when Cristiano left the club with 5 trophies? They might say yes, because at the moment, while things are growing, you can see green shoots. It's not as successful in silverware. But can a club like Juve, which was run by an idiot, if we're, Gabe was really nice about young Agnelli, but he's a clown. And maybe what happened was shown. Clowns traditionally wear shoes and pants that are too big for them, and Florentino took Agnelli's pants down. Maybe there was an element of what happened later in the Super League betrayal, as Florentino still thinks of it, by the then Juve chief, that he abandoned him. But I watched what I think was decline. There were parts of it that I enjoyed. I enjoyed seeing Cristiano testing himself, even in decline, that Gabe's talked about, in a new environment. I think it was slightly unfortunate that, again, Gabriel used in the terms about a new audience, new vista, a new stadia. He played in some of them in the Champions League, obviously. But to live day by day in Italian football is a privilege. But I would argue that across his career, he had stood out by his absolute dedication to how he lived and how he trained. I think he found more players, maybe not of his ability, who lived like that in Serie A, found a more disciplined life, and therefore, at his age, with his athleticism change, he made slightly less of a difference. For a part of his spell in Italy, there was, of course, the pandemic and the change in crowds. Not throughout the whole time, but it felt like elements were colliding a little bit. He patently, Rodri's anecdote, brilliant anecdote about I am Mr. Champions League to Rafa Benitez. He knew very early, and Juve knew about him, that this was not the Champions League winning ticket that they bought. And therefore, Florentino laughed all the way to the bank and said, look, I knew I sold at the right time. And there was patent success, because we can't broad brush and say it was a disaster, it was a complete failure, but could Juve afford to sustain the extra amount that they were paying out to him for the debt on transfer and for what his wages were compared to all the things that he was amassing for them? No, I think the love affair dipped relatively quick. And it was a volatile place. It casts, I'll close by saying, it casts retrospective light on Cristiano putting up with quite a volatile coaching situation at Real Madrid. I don't have the exact number of coaches, but Madrid went through them, and Cristiano shifted through the chaff and went, no, you're an idiot, you'll be gone, you'll be gone, and kept on winning because he was younger, he was more dominant, he was the alpha male, and then he wasn't, and the decline had begun at Juve. But I would be one to say that wasn't an overall disaster, certainly not for him. Juve gets better, place to say.
Yeah, no, I just want to just emphasize, going back on the back of what Graham said, I think it was already his second year at Juve. You came to realize, and look, it could also be, and I say this with the greatest of respect to Juve, Juve is not Real Madrid. Real Madrid is a unique club in the world. It is orders of magnitude on a different level, frankly, to everybody else, including Barcelona, Manchester United. The figure of Florentino, everything behind it. But already in the second season, you've got Andrea Pirlo coming in, a rookie coach, and they start talking about pressing systems and possessions and movements. You hear stories about how, by October, November, he'd come to training and he'd get, and look, superstars, especially like Cristiano, they often it's not unusual for them to do their own thing in training, right? Nobody's going to question his fitness. He knows his body better than anybody. Why not do that? But there were situations where he would come in and he'd get the guy who looked after him physically to go and ask, so what is the training plan today? And, like today we're going to be doing tactical movements and pressing rotations. And, he'd look outside, it's November in Turin, it's foggy. And he'd be like, all right, yeah, guess what? I have my hip flexor. I'm going to hit the gym and train on my own, right? So it's a fitness thing, but it was obvious he didn't want to be a part of it. He looked around, the team wasn't good, there were players coming and going. Juve made things worse. I think one of Juve's problems at that stage was they thought, oh, we have Cristiano, we need to surround Cristiano with big names, except you can't afford big names. So what do? You go and get free agents on Bosmans. You have to pay a ton of money, who were guys who were once good, but now maybe are a little past it. Had they maybe surrounded him with a lot of younger players, maybe not as talented, not as big name, but who were willing to go and run into the ground for him and do the work for Cristiano, then it might have been different. But in that context, he looks around and he says, I'm Cristiano, I'm 35, look at me, I can still do this, I can still jump out of the building and whatever. And now you're bringing me these other guys who were once really good, who are, they're not as good anymore. What are you doing? And there's really this sense of decline, of maybe we can really only raise it for big games. Let's put all our eggs in the Champions League basket and win it. I think all of these things came to a head. And that's why I think even after the second season, if Juve had found somebody who could take him without them losing their hat, which is not going to happen, they would have moved him on. And I think Cristiano would have moved on too.
Rodri, do you think that his move to Juventus hurt his legacy a little bit after what he left at Real Madrid?
I just think that it was a disappointment move for him, because I think when he got to Turin, he realized, first of all, that he's not a Real Madrid player anymore. Secondly, that he doesn't have the Manchester United time shape anymore. And I think that he moved from the main thing at Real Madrid to just a great top player, worldwide player, that has to teach the rest of the locker room how to behave to become a great player. And I think that was something disappointing to him, because I feel like he never found his place, or enough quality teammates for what he was trying to achieve in Juventus. Who, I mean, he just wanted to win another Champions League, and that was not possible for the project that he was involved in. And to me, to be honest, when I look back into his Juventus era, it's like, when you put Paul Weller, Paul Weller, Graham Hunter knows him perfectly. It's like putting Paul Weller in a reggaeton band, because he's still a great musician, a great composer, but at the same time, it's like, what do you want me to do with these musicians that they never will learn how to play guitar or electric guitars? It's like, okay, time to move on, because this has been a great time with Juventus in Italy. I never played or never imagined play for Serie A team. Okay, time to move on, because this is not the place, this is not the right moment, and I need something else.
Perfect. I just had to Google who Paul Weller was, and I don't think he would be doing very well in.
Don't you know him?
You can't Google that. These are two of his plectrums from his So Rodri's information was very, very good.
It's a very distinctive haircut, Alexis.
Okay. I feel like Rodri could pull off that haircut eventually.
That's Italian. What you couldn't understand, Gab's Italian there. What he said was he's a musical genius. It just came out all mangled.
It just came out all mangled. Well, perfect. Final question now for everyone, and it's kind of taking us back a little bit to Real Madrid times. But speaking of that question, that last question I just asked Rodri about Cristiano Ronaldo's legacy, and if he felt that the move to Juventus kind of, because it was surrounded by so much negativity, and we started to see, as we said, a Cristiano Ronaldo that was getting on in his 30s, not surrounded by the best players or the best managers, but you still had the belief that it's Cristiano Ronaldo. He will find a way to put them all on his back and make this work. And that's something that we would have had to think as well in terms of his international career. When we talk about international titles with Cristiano, which we haven't really touched on as much yet. When we're talking about the GOATs, when we're talking about the GOAT debate, one thing that we kept saying why Lionel Messi could not be compared to Pelé or Maradona was because he did not have an international title for Argentina. Now we know that he got the international title in winning the World Cup. Cristiano Ronaldo, it was similar as well, but of course he finally had won a Euro with Portugal. We could finally see him celebrating, because years before we only remember that image of him crying when they were shattered after shockingly losing to Greece. Gab, let me start with you on this one. When he finally won that Euro, it was while he was still at Real Madrid. How much did his legacy need it? How important was it for him to get that international title?
I'm in the minority here. For me, it's completely irrelevant. It's an accident of birth. That's all it is. So just as I don't think it impacted Messi one way or another, but then I'm also the guy who thinks the Ballon d'Or is all nonsense and all these guys are idiots by getting wound up about it. So take it for what it's worth. You're asking the wrong guy about that. What I can say, though, about that team that won, that Portugal team that won the Euros, Cristiano was not fit going into the tournament. It was very obvious in the games. He still played. And obviously in the final, he was basically the assistant coach. I remember being there. The ground staff did this weird thing where I think they watered the pitch and then turned on the lights, which led to all these, there was like an infestation of bugs everywhere. And he's there on the sidelines next to Fernando Santos, and he is giving it his all. And I had the privilege of knowing people involved in that Portugal team, and they talked about how it really did take a village, because this was a team which had, they had talent, but they also probably less talent than they have now, frankly, top to bottom. They had, we remember who scored the winning goal. It was Eder. They did it in France, against the host nation. All these things coming together, it was really a masterpiece of teamwork. I'm not saying Ronaldo was the non-playing captain, because he did contribute on the pitch. But if you look at the way the game went, Portugal had a terrible group stage. They kind of survived. It was really him being a leader in a different way in that tournament. So for me, that is an important part of his legacy, because he showed an entirely different dimension in that tournament. One that maybe you don't need at Real Madrid, because at Real Madrid, everything goes great and you've got great players around you and you've got a strong club and whatever else. So to me, that just added another brick, if you want, to the greatness. But that would have been the case if it hadn't scored and they had lost in the final too. I like to think about performances more than silverware. Silverware, whatever.
I think he was really important for Cristiano. Not only for what he was doing at Real Madrid, but also because, I mean, Portugal indeed is a huge, massive national team. I remember it was in 2016 when they won with Ricardo Carvalho, with Pepe, was at his best at Real Madrid. I remember William Carvalho, Andre Gomez, Nani, so many great and talented players.
Sorry if I jump in there. You're being very polite, right? You had old Ricardo Carvalho. You had Pepe. Pepe is old now. He was old then too.
Now, but
William
no way then.
Carvalho, really? Come on. Andre Gomes, like when you talk about the talent, this is what makes him so special. So I get animated about this. There was not a talented Portugal team. You compare the 2004 team, for example, right, when you still had Rui Costa and Figo and those guys. This was a team that he came together as a unit and won it. But this was not. I mean, unless you really believe that Andre Gomes all of a sudden is, Brian Robson, Frank Rijkaard, and Rodri rolled into one, which he's not.
Okay, but that gives Cristiano Ronaldo and his squad more credit because,
of course,
for me, Portugal national team now is much better than the one that they got by that time. But at the end of the day, it's like Cristiano was obsessed with winning a big title with Portugal. Just like Messi. Because I agree with you, Gap, because I will never understand why these players need to be really important with their national teams because it's something stupid. It's just, as you mentioned, an accident because no one can handle where they are born. But at the same time, it's like, okay, we don't have a bad team. We need to be something important because Portugal, they are always the great deception in every single big tournaments. And, but that time it was like, okay, I got it. And now I'm important, not only for Real Madrid, for Manchester United, for whoever team they play for. I'm important for my country, for my people, because when he left Sporting de Portugal to Manchester United in his early ages, Portugal thought that he was going to be the new Eusebio. But Eusebio was like, Eusebio was different because he achieved great success with Portugal. But this is something that for Cristiano Ronaldo was a challenge. And when he got it, it was like, oh my God, this is something that could be a legacy for my family, for my fans, for my Portuguese people. So that is why I think it was important. I mean, in my point of view, it wasn't something needed for him to be part of this big tournament in Portugal. But I think it was something important for his personal life too.
Graham, where do you stand in this debate?
The boys, you know me less well, but the boys know my love and respect for them. I think I've heard them tell untruths in that the theme about like it doesn't matter to win for your country or you can't believe that a big football. So how he's judged, he wins or loses that final. I think judgment doesn't change. And I think his legacy is huge. But the fact that if you're that man or woman with that talent, that it wouldn't eat at your soul that you can't win an international trophy, whichever description it is, the World Cup and Euros, then now the Nations League, etc. If you're that good, and also if he's driven, which he is, he's driven in a way that I've not seen in other footballers, many of whom live and breathe, but he's obsessed by must win everything.
Sorry, Graham. I don't doubt that it matters to him, just like all winning the Ballon d'Or matters to him. It just doesn't matter to me and his legacy.
Yeah,
I don't think it should matter to anybody.
That's fine, but if we put ourselves in his shoes,
oh yeah, of course, it's
big players. I can't imagine why they're so obsessed. But if it's also, I think Cristiano Ronaldo. You said in the intro, that's just the pain of the two. His big tournaments are bookended by the two ugliest things imaginable. The way Greece win, and he's in that final as a kid, and he's in tears in his home nation, and it's a disaster that lives with you. Secondly, the way, as Geb pointed out, the way that Portugal win that tournament, it's one of the ugliest wins. They were rotten. They stank the house out. If that was your first experience of football, you don't buy another ticket. It was that bad. But you lift the trophy, etc. I can empathize with him and think about how important it was. And what I know from the training camp during that tournament was that living day to day again with Quaresma, who's a very different, who's achieved different things, but who matters a lot to Cristiano spiritually, not just because they began together sporting, and it was the case that the Quaresma got the first exit and the next cab was for Cristiano. They understand each other. They think about what to do with the ball differently, but they think the same about what to do when on the pitch together. So in matches and in training camps, that experience was one that he hasn't had a lot throughout his career. Whereas like me and you were hermanos. He was friendly with some players across his career, but absolutely tight, hermeneutically sealed brothership with another footballer is something he hasn't had a great deal over his career. And that's not a criticism. It's just a fact. But he had it with Quaresma for that short, sweet summer. So ultimately, had he won the World Cup, then it would have been, that would have been even ahead of the Champions League, the crown of glory for him. It wasn't really a prospect. It was, I live in Rodri's country. The change in Spain's football mentality, having won the World Cup, was gigantic. I think he knew that there could be unlocking of Portugal of future ideas, future Cristianos, a change in how the country viewed itself. Set all that aside. The basic point is he knew how to win any which way. On the pitch for all his clubs, or waving his arms around on the touchline for Portugal in that mad final against France.
Right, whether it's sexy football or ugly football, if it'll win you a title, it's football, right? Well, thank you so much, guys. Right now, it's time for a break. But when we come back, we will discuss Cristiano's move back to Manchester United and how it nearly ended up being to the other side of the city. Okay, well, thanks to Rodri, Gab, and Graham. But now I've got Augie and Rob back because we're going to talk about the second coming of Cristiano Ronaldo at Manchester United. Now, we have a phrase in Spanish that says, amores repetidos son errores repetidos, meaning repeated exes are repeated errors. You don't go back to your ex, but Cristiano Ronaldo did in terms of going back to Manchester United. And why not? You know, by then, the relationship was still such a good one, you know, but Augie, he almost, or what we were made to believe is that he almost didn't go. He almost went, dare I say, to the crosstown rivals, Manchester City. Was that actually on the table?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real sliding doors moment, isn't it? If he'd gone to City, then who knows how both, you know, they signed Erling Haaland a year later, so who knows, you know, how things would have played out. But yeah, the reality is
Ronaldo was a product of United, you know, you could say. And we know how much his relationship with Sir Alex Ferguson meant, as we discussed.
Yeah, but the thing is, you know, City were desperate for a striker that year, and Pep was exploring any possibility to get someone to score goals, and they did speak, and City were certainly making moves. I'm still not convinced it would have happened. I'm still not sure he would have worked out as a Pep player, but that you know, Ronaldo was talking to City, and I think that shows, let's take the romance out of this, that he was prepared to go to Man City. So he was prepared to go to Manchester City despite the fact he loves Man United. So let's not forget that. But the reality
that was 100%.
Yeah.
He was considering it.
Yeah, of course he was. But the thing is, we have to just go back a bit in time here. So he left United in 2009. Right from 2013, United were trying to sign him back. So that was Ferguson's last year. They played Real Madrid in the Champions League, I think maybe a quarter-final or round of 16, I can't quite remember now. But so that day, Ferguson, that was his first return back to Old Trafford, and Ferguson had requested that when they read the teams out, they would go against the usual tradition, would be opposition first, then the home team with the second. He said to the PA guy at the stadium, I wanted to read Real Madrid out second and leave Ronaldo to the last, because Ferguson felt he could get into Ronaldo's head. And so basically he read the team out, and it went Modric and Ramos, etc. And right at the end he said, and welcome back to Old Trafford, our very own magnificent seven, Cristiano Ronaldo. And there's a huge ovation. And the part of that was, first of all, Ferguson wanted to kind of put him off his game, but also they were laying the steps down to get him back. They felt if they could show Ronaldo how much he was loved at United, at the time he never quite got that affection at Real initially. And they wanted to show Ronaldo that this is your home, come back in. And the ovation he got was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. Anyway, the summer's passed, and David Moyes came in, tried for Ronaldo. 3 or 4 summers past, Ed Woodward was desperate to get Ronaldo, because we know at United at that time were a club that wanted big names. And when the chance came around again, when he was leaving Juventus, United had no strategy in place to get Ronaldo, but because he was going to go to Man City, it was felt that we can't allow this to happen.
Yeah.
And that was somebody at United told me that we can't allow this to happen. Well, you could have realised it was a bad idea, but you let it happen. So almost like, the whole drinking the Kool-Aid moment, let's get Ronaldo back. So they make the move for Ronaldo and it's done. Rio gets involved, Rio Ferdinand gets involved, Sir Alex Ferguson gets involved, the big player, please come back Cristiano, don't get to Man City. He came back and then the rest is history, as they say.
The rest is history indeed, Rob. And his debut actually wasn't that bad. It almost seemed like the stars had aligned and we were going to see pretty much the second coming as good as the first.
Well, yeah. I mean, thinking back, that 4-1 win over Newcastle on the day that he made his second debut was probably about as optimistic as I've ever felt Old Trafford in the last 10 years, probably. Yeah. Because United had done quite well under Solskjaer. They'd shown that they were kind of moving in the right direction. They'd started to make moves in the transfer market that fans thought they should be doing, signing likes of Rafael Varane, Jadon Sancho. There was a feeling at the time that Ronaldo might be the last piece of the jigsaw, and that he could still score goals in the Premier League to get United and turn him into title challengers. There was a little bit of debate about whether he could still do it in the Premier League. Obviously, it's a much more competitive league than Serie A. He'd done really well with Juventus and carried on scoring goals, but there was a question about whether he could do it in the Premier League. Turns up at Old Trafford to play Newcastle and scores twice and kind of makes all those doubts disappear straight away. That first season, I mean, I think he exceeded most people's expectations, really, given that the stage of his career he was in. Obviously, the problems with Ronaldo and his second stint at Old Trafford came after that.
No, I was going to say that it was a good first season, but you could argue that he halted United's progress.
I was waiting for this. I was like, let's have someone bring us back down to earth.
But I think he destabilised Marcus Rashford's development. Mm-hmm. I think Marcus Rashford at that point was growing into a role where he was the United main guy at United, and then obviously Edinson Cavani.
Were the players told to just kind of just give everything to him?
No, not so much that, but the way that Ronaldo played, I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was basically said, there you go, there's Ronaldo, make it work. And Ole was just about building a team that was, Cavani had done well in his first season, Rashford was developing, and then Ronaldo comes in and plays for the middle. Rashford has to play a position, Cavani loses interest, loses his shirt number, I think he has to go up to number 7. And as well as Ronaldo did on his own, the team didn't do well. Yeah. And I think, I'm as big a Ronaldo fan as anybody. I think he's a brilliant player, brilliant professional, but he did actually, it was all about the noise off the pitch and the kind of the showbiz with that. It wasn't a football move. It was a bad idea football-wise. And it did kind of say, like I say, it knocked Rashford out of his development. I don't think Rashford's ever been in the same place since. He had that brief spell after the World Cup, but his progress was halted and diverted by Ronaldo coming back. And that is the kind of the consequence of the move.
So Solskjaer's big thing when he came in, because he came in after Jose, was to alter the mood around United. It was all about togetherness, team. There wasn't any particular superstar, but the team as a whole were moving in the right direction. And then he's almost forced to kind of drop Ronaldo into this. And Solskjaer has given quite telling interviews since he was sacked. And he's asked the question, do you think it was the right idea to bring Ronaldo back? And all he can say is, at the time, they didn't know what else to do, that they thought that they had to do it. Now, that's not him saying we had to do it because he's such a fantastic player. They had to do it because there was a possibility they thought that he might go to City, and they wanted him back. And it did initially give everyone a lift. But then Solskjaer gets sacked in November. The team aren't playing particularly well. And then you bring Ralf Rangnick in, who wants to play this kind of high energy, high pressing football. And the one thing Ronaldo at his age at that time did not want to do is press the ball. And then you're left with this massive conundrum then about what you do about Ronaldo. Can you pick him? Can you teach him to do something else at that age? Do you leave him out? And how do you deal with the storm around him every time he does or doesn't play? And it just became this huge soap opera. And it was a soap opera from that point all the way until the end of his second spell at United.
Well, you mentioned the storm around it, which is nothing new. I'm sure Portugal definitely can say a thing or two about that as well. But what about the stories, Augie, that we heard from, younger players, even on United's senior team and even in the academy, when they would see him, you know, in the gym, it made them want to work out more. They would see what he was eating. Obviously, he eats a lot healthier than everyone, and they would suddenly not opt for a dessert option. They would suddenly not opt for the potatoes. They'd get some quinoa. I don't think they had eaten quinoa at Carrington in years, but that kind of impact, was there any weight to that? At least that United would have said, well, see, this is another reason why. Because we heard about it similar when Zlatan was there, that just his presence in the dressing room, his aura, you know, it helped the players. And respectfully, of course, to Zlatan, and you know I'm a massive Zlatan fan, but when we talk about auras and presences at Manchester United, it's hard to find bigger in recent times too than Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah, I think second time around, I don't think that was the case for Ronaldo. I think, you know, in the best possible way, he's quite a selfish player. It is about himself, and you can never question Ronaldo's commitment or dedication, but I don't think he was doing things for the benefit of the team at that point. And I think the whole young player element, I'm not quite sure is it a case then. I think there was some of the senior players were kind of unhappy about how he was indulged and some of the things he would say. I mean, I remember once being told that he'd asked Solskjaer to make the team quicker, get the ball to him faster, and you know, Ollie denied it at the time, but it was true. But that was again classic Ronaldo. Get the ball to me. Get the ball to me. Not about the team mechanics, you know. So I think that his selfishness came at that worst possible time when the club was falling apart with the Solskjaer situation, Rangnick coming in, players unhappy. He was almost like the catalyst to that, because again, he couldn't lay anything against him professionally, but because he was quite a selfish player, it was all about him. He kind of enabled that the rest of the team to become selfish and kind of individuals. So it was just a bad move all around the second time around.
It was just the instability of it all, I think. I think that the problem that United fans have got with it is that at the time that he joined United for the second time, there was a feeling of kind of stability for the first time in a long time under Solskjaer. That we're moving in the right direction, but then you get a season where things don't go your way. You change your manager. Ronaldo's presence there seemed to kind of contribute to this kind of, I don't know, uncertainty around the club, and it just didn't help. And it made it really, really tough for Ralph Rangnick. I mean, Ralph Rangnick, I think, you know, a lot of United fans have looked at what he's said since and thought that he was talking quite a lot of sense about the problems at Man United. But really with Ronaldo, he never really stood a chance, because Ronaldo was such a big personality. He was kind of in charge of that dressing room. You know, there were stories at the time of Ronaldo going to Ralph Rangnick and saying, "Oh, I know that you play with one up front, but I think we should play with two up front because that would help me." And Rangnick saying, "Well, no, because my style of football is to play with one up front, and you know, maybe sometimes you're going to have to sit on the bench." And Ronaldo kind of enlisting senior players like Bruno Fernandes and Paul Pogba to come with him into Rangnick's office to say, "We all think that you should be playing two up front," because that's what suited Ronaldo at the time. And that was the kind of thing that Rangnick was having to deal with at the time. And it just made his job, and it's hard for an interim manager anyway. But when you're dealing with issues like that on the side, particularly when it comes to someone like Ronaldo, it made it near impossible.
Well, he did make it clear, as Cristiano Ronaldo does, that he did want to leave when things started to go sour, when obviously he kicked off with Rangnick as well. But Augie, were you surprised that nobody was kind of in the market for him?
No, because nobody's in the market because nobody's in the market for when he signed for United. The City thing was almost a panic move, and United signing was a panic buy. Back in what year was it? 2021. He was a panic buy. It was panic interest for two clubs, and you know, 2 years later, or a year later, it was the same. So, you know, he ended up in Saudi Arabia because, as we know, there was no look. He was on. Ronaldo cost a lot of money in terms of wages, and the fee wouldn't have been so much of an issue. But no, I'm not surprised, because, I mean, how old was he then? 37, 38? No, he went to Saudi Arabia, and, you know, they saw in the World Cup in 2022 how he wasn't particularly pulling up any trees. So United just gave him a one last chance of glory in a big league, and it didn't work out.
And it made Erik ten Hag's, you know, his first season particularly quite tough, because you know, Ten Hag comes in after Ralph Rangnick, again, someone who wants to play this kind of high pressing, high intensity football. Ronaldo's still there. That they come to an agreement where Ronaldo is allowed to leave that summer if there's interest. There's a little bit of talk about Chelsea, I think, at one point, but nothing really materialised. In fairness to Ronaldo, that same summer he has a personal tragedy, which means that he can't go on the pre-season tour. But Erik ten Hag comes in. It's meant to be all about this new manager and this new direction, new era at Old Trafford. I was sat in his first press conference on the pre-season tour, and the first 10 questions are all about Ronaldo. Is he staying? Is he going? What are you going to do with him? How are you going to make him play your style of football? Can he play your style of football? And he seemed to just kind of drown in it a little bit. And it put Ten Hag on the back foot almost immediately, and then we saw that it unravelled, so quickly after that it early on in 2022, before the Qatar World Cup, that Ronaldo was giving that interview with Piers Morgan where he completely slams United. Ten Hag tears down the entire club, talking about the facilities aren't good enough, the manager isn't good enough, and it was a really kind of sour end to a pretty forgettable period in Ronaldo's career. One that at the time felt like it could have been this kind of fantastic move if it had been the last piece of the jigsaw, but it just unravelled so quickly, and it became really, really messy by the end.
And the thing is, a lot of things that he said in that interview had been borne out to be right. Ten Hag wasn't the guy.
I was going to say, did he lie though?
The facilities. But the problem is, it was his selfishness again, that it was all about him. If he had gone to United and said, like, I'm going to be your last 20-minute guy, the guy that comes off the bench after 70 minutes, he'd be brilliant at that. But he always wanted to start games, and he was too old.
But can you blame him? It was Cristiano Ronaldo. He's a perfectionist.
Yeah, but it can't all be about you, or it can't all be about him. If you're a team player, which he isn't really, you have to kind of, play for the team. What I mean is that he has to kind of allow himself to see the bigger picture. His age means that he's not as mobile as he was. Why not be a guy that comes in after 70 minutes or an hour when the opposition team are tiring? They'll get you goals. But he wasn't interested. He wanted to be all about him. So that's why it didn't work at United, because he couldn't, see Rangnick saying we need two up front. Well, if he saw that would be detrimental to the team. You don't say it. You say, tell you what, we'll put Marcus Rashford through the middle, and when he tires, or, the last 20 minutes when you need an extra body, I'll come on. But no, that's why he went to Saudi Arabia, because he wants to play. Fine, if you want to play, no problem, go and play. But don't expect one of the biggest clubs in the world to change everything to suit you when you're 38, 39.
He also became something that I don't think that he would have stood for in his prime. There's an episode where, against Spurs at Old Trafford, where Ten Hag tries to bring him on late in the game and he refuses to come on. Now, in his prime at Real Madrid and Man United in his first spell, he wouldn't have settled for that from a young player, telling the manager, I'm not going to come on, because his demands of players were so high, and he became, as Mark said, he became completely focused on himself and suggesting things, as Mark has said, that were detrimental to the team, because he was chasing these individual goals and these individual prizes, that he just became obsessed, I think, with himself and his own kind of targets, and he didn't really care whether that affected the teams he was playing in or not.
I think as well, just in his defence, give him a bit of a kick in.
I was ready to jump in and defend him as well.
the Man United that he left was stock full of superstars and great players and winners, and he'd gone back to a club that was not full of winners. It was full of players that were not good enough to play for Man United, and it must have killed him to look around the dressing room thinking, you lot aren't good enough. But a lot of them probably don't care as much as they should do, surrounded by players that were picking up easy money, because and the whole mentality of the club had changed. It had become a soft club, a weak mentality club, and that wasn't what he left behind. So he'd have gone there thinking, this isn't me, this isn't the environment I want to be in. But he didn't help it himself, but I can understand why he was frustrated, because it wasn't what Ronaldo was all about.
Part of the problem is, though, that we talked about in his first spell at Man United, that transformation from boy to man and becoming this kind of superstar. In his second spell at United, he should have been more aware of the transformation back down from superstar to kind of bit part player. Now, he's far more experienced in football circles than any of the three of us. So if we can see it, then he should have certainly been able to see it. That he should have been able to, like Mark says, he should have been able to see that if he wanted to thrive in that Man United, or even at that level with another team, that he had to accept taking steps back down the ladder from going all the way up to the top to being the main man every single week to coming back down. Because the one thing that Ronaldo can't defeat is time and age.
Yeah.
You can do as much time in the gym as you want. You're always going to get older. You're always going to get slower. You need to accept that, things don't stay the same forever. And he should have been able to be aware of that. And what we saw in that second spell at Man United is that he wasn't aware of it. And that's part of the motivation, as Mark again has said, that's why he ends up in Saudi Arabia, because he still wants to be the main man. He can't handle being a bit part player. It doesn't matter about the level he's playing at. It's about how big an impact he is having. And it's like, it's like the big kid, playing with the younger school kids in the playground. I don't want to play with my own age because they're all the same level as me. I'm going to go and play with the 10-year-olds because I'm going to score 5 in every game. That was the kind of mentality that he began to have. And I think the way that it all ended at United in that second spell tarnished his legacy a little bit at the club, and not taking anything away from what he did and achieved in his first spell. But the way that he left at the end, I think, has really affected how Man United fans will remember him. And it's telling that He had a song, Viva Ronaldo, that they sang in his first spell. They sang it all the way through his time at Real Madrid and Juventus, and sang it again when he came back to Man United. The lyrics of that song now have been changed to Viva Garnacho. You don't sing Viva Ronaldo anymore. It's Viva Garnacho. And that tells you everything you need to know about how Man United fans view him.
They'll probably have to change the lyrics again soon, but that's a discussion for another day. Augie.
Yeah, I just think one thing I'd say about how it ended the second time, when he left in 2009 and the years after that, people within United spoke with such affection. They loved him, how down to earth he was. And, I saw it myself. I did a press conference at the World Cup in South Africa in 2010. He'd left United a year earlier, and the Portuguese press officer was saying no more questions. And there was a few of us that were actually on the Manchester patch in Port Elizabeth watching this game. And Ronaldo said, no, these are my friends from Manchester, take a question. So that's his kind of humility, despite the fact he's an arrogant superstar. He has got quite a humble side. But when he came back the second time, that was not so much there. And I think by the time he left, whereas in 2009 people missed him and regretted him going and had this affection for him, the second time they couldn't wait to see the back of him because it was a problem. So I think that tarnished his reputation to that extent, whereby, like Rob said, they don't even sing his name anymore.
All right, well, Cristiano Ronaldo's time at Manchester United started coming to a close right there, and that news broke at the World Cup in Qatar, because then it was announced that he would be off to the Saudi Pro League. We're going to discuss that after this break. All right, well, it's time to complete our journey through time and talk about the present, which is Saudi Arabia. When Cristiano Ronaldo announced that that's where he was going next, it kind of, I would say, made a lot of us go, interesting, especially given how he left Manchester United. So plenty to talk about here, which is why we've brought Gab back with us, with myself, Alexis, Rob, and Augie. But before we talk about his move to Saudi Arabia, when that news broke, it was when all of us were at the Qatar World Cup. And in true Cristiano Ronaldo fashion, all the headlines went back to Ronaldo, especially because he was a part of that World Cup, what many of us are assuming is his last World Cup, but who are we to age him? So he was part of it, Gab, and I just kind of want you to chronicle your thoughts of his performance for Portugal at the Qatar World Cup. Because at the end of the day, we were going into that World Cup talking about how, is it a good idea to have him here? Do Portugal need to still rely on him? And I feel like some people were split 50-50. I know how Augie felt. But some people were still saying, I would rather have an aging Cristiano Ronaldo than nothing at all. He is who he is. He's fitter than some of us. But in the end, it started well for him. He scored. And then we were talking about how he was on the bench. So overall, your thoughts from what you witnessed at the Qatar World Cup?
Well, first of all, Gonzalo Ramos thanks you for describing him as nothing at all. You said, I'd rather have Cristiano Ronaldo than nothing at all. It was interesting because obviously that debate was there, right? It had to do with the style of play and some of the other players that had come into the squad. They had so much attacking talent. Gonzalo Ramos was kind of the up-and-coming center forward. But even beyond that, the speed of execution of some of the players around them, you wonder if Cristiano was fit. I assumed, okay, he and Fernando Santos had this symbiotic relationship. They won the Euros together. No way is he dropping Cristiano. And then he did. And, that really came as a surprise. And it would turn out to be Fernando Santos' last World Cup. Cristiano's international career would later continue. But I think that was definitely a blow for him. And I genuinely thought, I was there in the last game before they got knocked out. And, he came on because they were on their way out. He had a couple chances. And you could see how much it hurt him, how much it really affected him to be dropped in these circumstances.
Yeah, it became the Ronaldo show, didn't it? And it has been the Ronaldo show for quite a long time, but it was ridiculous in Qatar because it was obvious that he wasn't the player he was and that he was, Portugal could have won the World Cup without him, not because of him. And I think he held him up a little bit in the sense that he was just too predictable, too immobile. He still scores goals, but not against the top teams. And I think we've seen that ever since. But
his presence counted for something, don't you think? Or we hear about that, how you have this larger than life figure.
No, not some more. I don't think. I think by Qatar, I think opponents wanted him to play because he was kind of a weak link, and it continued, during the Euros. But I think, Ronaldo, great goal scorer that he is. I think by the time we got to Qatar, it was just basically about him adding to his goals tally.
The whole thing overshadowed Portugal's campaign in Qatar. There's the interview, obviously, that ended his time at Man United had come out on a Sunday night after the last Premier League game. Then everyone had flown off to Qatar. The questions immediately were all about Ronaldo. I remember sitting in a press conference with Bernardo Silva, and the first 15 questions were all about Ronaldo. And he turned around at one point and went, "Is anyone going to ask about the World Cup? We're quite happy to be here," kind of laughing about it, because he knew what was going to come. Yeah. There were stories about a fallout with Bruno Fernandes, because obviously Fernandes was at United, and how that relationship had been strained by what Ronaldo had said about Man United. There was already talk, as Gab said, even before a ball had been kicked, about whether Ronaldo should play or not. Obviously, he started the first couple of games. As the tournament went on, we learned that he was going to get dropped, and eventually did get dropped. Obviously, Ramos played in that game against Switzerland and scored a hat-trick, I think, which kind of compounded this whole debate around whether Ronaldo should even play or not. Portugal were forced to kind of wheel him out for a press conference at 8 o'clock in the morning at their training camp, miles away from anywhere in Qatar, because basically they didn't want anyone to speak to him. They wanted a situation where they were trying to hide this massive problem as much as they could, but because it's Ronaldo and because of the media were only interested in him and his story and where he was going to go next and what was happening with him, they couldn't do it. And you won't find a Portugal player who will tell you that it affected them in Qatar. But you could tell by speaking to them in the mix zone, in press conferences, they were getting sick of it. And by the end of it, they just didn't want to answer questions about it because they were sick of the entire show.
I think Portugal were also let down by Fernando Santos's handling of this.
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways. You can't be this sort of dark, mystical father figure to everybody, to Cristiano and whatever. Like, if you're going to play that character, and part of that means often playing, for my money, not playing to Portugal's strengths, and then playing a certain brand of defensive football, which he did, in the name of Cristiano and defending Cristiano the whole time. You can't just turn around and go all Judas Iscariot on him in the middle of the tournament. Clearly there was a breakdown in the relationship. And Fernando Santos, by the way, he retired after, as far as I know, after the World Cup. Or certainly, he knew he was going. He'd been there a long time. He's older. I just thought making that decision, doing that U-turn on Cristiano in the middle of the World Cup, when you know that there would have been assurances, that there would have been a certain way of approaching the situation, because that's how he'd handled it for the previous 10 years. I thought that really exacerbated the situation. And a lot of people are going to take pot shots at Cristiano over this, but I think whatever blame there is ought to be shared around.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because that's what I was thinking. I feel like after, not just how Santos handled the situation, but a lot of shots were taken to Cristiano because of how he handled the situation. And I mean, if it's the one thing we know about Cristiano is that he loves his country. He loves playing for Portugal. He talks about it so much. He's talked about how, he took to the pitch just moments after his father passed away, because it's what he would want to do. It's his country. But this time around, how it was handled, do you feel like, looking back at this World Cup and how it panned out with him and how he took the headlines and how teammates spoke out about it, do you feel like it tarnished his legacy somewhat?
No. I think in the immediate moment, it probably did. People were questioning. But I think when people take a step back and look at Ronaldo's legacy, I mean, he did, although he missed the final through injury, he did play a massive part in Portugal winning Euro 2016. And, he's won a major trophy. He's not won the World Cup like Messi has, and Messi took a long time to win the World Cup. So I think when the dust settles, Ronaldo is still an incredible player, incredible achievements, the amount of goals he's scored, for every club he's been out for his country. I mean, the goals record he's got with Portugal. I was there that night. It was in Faro in Portugal when they beat the Republic of Ireland, and he broke the world record for goals, and it was just absolutely incredible.
The men's world record.
Yeah, the men's goal record. Yeah, it was Ali, wasn't it, the Iranian player that he overtook? He's now probably 20, 25 goals beyond him now. He's just taking it to a different level. But he just makes headlines wherever he goes, and the amount of times he's rescued Portugal in moments. So listen, it was a. I was going to say it was a messy end to his career, probably the wrong word, but it might not be the end, because he might still be there in 26. I wouldn't be surprised if Ronaldo is playing for Portugal in 26. I'm not saying it's a good thing, or it should be, but I wouldn't be surprised if he is.
I would not be surprised if he is either. All right, well, after...
Sure, one more point on Cristiano's international career, and people have to give him credit for this, I think. After the World Cup, Fernando Santos leaves, and the new coach isn't even Portuguese. It's Roberto Martinez, or Martinez, as people call him in this country.
No. We will say it right.
Roberto comes in, and this was a perfect opportunity. If he wanted to, if he thought it was right for Portugal, to turn the page, to say, Cristiano, I owe you nothing. I'm not from this country. Let's move on. Let's emphasize the other players. Let's restructure everything. They had long conversations. And what did he do? He kept them. He kept them as part of it, and he took them to the Euros and whatever. We can debate whether it was right or wrong, but I think we have to show that it couldn't just be that Cristiano was the problem. If somebody completely different who didn't owe him anything came in with license to make a change and chose, no, I want to keep Cristiano in here.
All right. Well, after the World Cup, and actually during the World Cup, because it was when, we heard that he had gone back to Real Madrid. He was training at Valdebebas. We were wondering if, he was going to go back there, rekindle his relationship with Los Blancos. But then the news came that he was going to be going to Saudi Arabia in a big money move. And of course, as a marquee signing, which we know the Saudi Pro League is after these days. Augie, you described this as a sad ending to at least his club career, because we know the thoughts or the stigma that is attached to the Saudi Pro League and when players go there. Do you still think that now?
No. I think, to be fair, I think, look, considering the clubs he's played for, Sporting, Man United, Real Madrid, Juventus, the elite clubs of the countries played at, elite European clubs, I did think at the time that you are, tarnishing your legacy a bit by going to Saudi Arabia. But, the Saudi Pro League is what it is. But he's gone there and he's really embraced it. He's really thrown himself into it. He's not just gone there to pick up the money. He has actually scored a lot of goals. He's done everything he's been asked to on and off the pitch. So, listen, it's a different game nowadays. Players don't stay at clubs forever. I think he's gone there and he has made a difference, whether we like it or not, to Saudi Arabian football. He's raised the profile of the country. They've probably got a World Cup on the back of it or part of it. So it's a sad ending in the sense that he's had to take a step down from the elite of European football. But it's a different element, isn't it? I don't know. I do think I was probably wrong to say that. I think it's been an interesting ending to his career.
Whoa. I was wrong to say that. Did Mark Ogden go back? Shock.
He picked status. He picked status over continuing his career in Europe. And
did he have many European options?
We have to remember that the summer before the World Cup, when Erik ten Hag came in at Man United, there was suggestions that he was allowed to leave Man United at that time, and that there was conversation going on behind the scenes about if there was any clubs willing to take him. Chelsea were rumoured to be interested at one point. There was other clubs who were had spoken to representative just to see what it would take to get him out of Man United. So they already knew what kind of offers were on the table. The problem for him was that if he was going to continue his career in Europe, he would have had to take a massive pay cut from what he was on at Man United. And also he would have had to accept a reduction in status, because the World Cup had already shown that at the top level, he probably wasn't that, top level player anymore, that he maybe have to sit on the bench for 6 months, playing 20 minutes here and 10 minutes there. He probably wasn't going to score 40 goals in 40 games. Maybe it was 10 goals in 50 games or something. That's the kind of level he would have had to accept. Saudi Arabia offered him a chance to still be the best player on the pitch. It still offered him the chance to score a goal every game, to be the most important guy on the field, to be the most important guy in the league. And that's what he chose. And obviously the money helped, because the amount of money that was involved in taking him to Al Nassr was staggering. But he chose status. He chose status over continuing his career in Europe's top 5 leagues.
I think there were a few other, I agree with everything Rob said, I think there's a few other wrinkles on this as well. One is, around this time, the relationship with his longtime agent, Uncle George Mendes, kind of didn't, I won't say deteriorated, because it's obviously still there.
Yeah.
But there was a moment of drift. In fact, the person who set up the deal to take him to Saudi was somebody else. And I think there was a sense of wanting some independence, wanting to spread his wings a little bit, maybe explore a new league. The money was part of it. And I think to a normal person, they'd look at this and say, like, it's probably worth, close to $500 million. Why do you need more money? I think to him, maybe it's a way of keeping score. Personally, as a romantic, I would have loved one or two things I wrote about at the time. I would have said either go back to Sporting Lisbon, where it all began, or keep an eye on your little friend. Wherever Messi goes, you go with him. And for one time only, I think, in the history of sport, you create, I don't think it's happened in any sport anywhere. I stand to be corrected. Maybe in rugby league somewhere, I wouldn't know. But like, you have two GOATs coming together in their career and playing on one team. And you know what? If it means you need to go and take a pay cut, hey, I'm going to put this on pay-per-view and give you a slice, and you will make much more money than you're ever going to make in Saudi
But that was
Arabia.
part of the plan, wasn't it? Because Messi was destined for Saudi Arabia until he
But
wasn't.
not for Al Nassr.
No, but I mean, it could have happened. It could have happened in the same league. I don't think it was ever going to go to the MLS together. But I think there was a plan whereby they would see out their days.
How much cooler would it be if they finally teamed up at the end, the two adversaries coming together?
Someone providing an assist to a goal. Oh, my days.
Come on.
He's not a romantic, remember.
Listen,
Yo, Inter Miami, if you're listening, come on, somebody out there.
that'd be a 9-man team, wouldn't it? Let's be honest. I mean, but which one's tracking back and which one's kind of...
Well, same thing in Real Madrid with Mbappe and Vinicius.
It's like watching PSG all over again with Neymar, Messi and Mbappe. But anyway.
But Rob was actually there. I remember we were there doing the Supercopa de España when that news broke too. He was signing for Al Nassr. And immediately, even though it was an El Clasico going on there in Saudi Arabia, we all went into Ronaldo watch. Everyone started going to Al Nassr, just trying to get a look at the training ground, just trying to get a look at the stadium, seeing what the fans were like. So much so that Rob had to stop, drop, and roll all the way to Riyadh to join us as well. Rob, but you were there. I left just before, but you came in to take in the first game that he was there. What was it like? Just kind of take us back to that moment.
Well, I mean, that entire week was crazy, really, because as you said, there was the Spanish Super Cup, then it was followed by the Italian Super Cup. Then they had Messi over there playing for PSG against a Saudi Pro League select team, which obviously included Ronaldo before he'd actually made his debut for Al Nassr. His Al Nassr debut got delayed actually because he had a suspension running from his time at Man United, so he had to wait a couple of weeks before he could actually play. I think it was against Al Ettifaq, and to be honest, his arriving in Saudi Arabia did exactly what they had hoped. I mean, no one had heard of Al Nassr. I certainly hadn't before Ronaldo signed there. I had no idea what colour shirts they were, and then all of a sudden you saw this explosion of this blue and yellow shirts all over the world with Ronaldo's name on it.
Did you get one?
I did.
Come on. Oh, of
I
course.
did get-
Of course.
Piece of history, isn't it?
Had to be done.
And then he turned up at his first game, and he used to see Ronaldo play at Old Trafford and at the Bernabeu in Real Madrid in front of sort of 80,000 people. And Al Nassr Stadium is nice and it's clean and it's it does its job, but it's very compact. It doesn't hold an awful lot of people. It just seemed quite surreal to see Ronaldo playing in that environment. But as I said before, again, for Ronaldo, it did exactly what he'd hoped, because in that first game, it was full of step-overs, it was full of tricks, turns, crowd suing every time that he passed the ball. We'd seen at Man United previously that he wasn't that player anymore. He tried to do step-overs, and he wasn't quick enough anymore, so he was getting whacked into the first row of the stands. For Al Nassr, he was still able to kind of puff his chest out and show that he was still Ronaldo, and the fans loved it. And that's probably exactly the reason why he chose to play for Al Nassr and go to Saudi Arabia, because he got that kind of adoration for the fans again. And he looked reborn in a way, because we'd seen him struggle at Man United, sit on the bench. He kind of got a little bit grey, and you'd see that he was sort of downtrodden a little bit. Certainly World Cup had done that. And he comes out for Al Nassr. The level of the league is not what he's used to, and not what we were expecting, or what he was used to seeing him in. But suddenly again, he was the best player on the pitch, which is exactly what he wanted.
Well, with the Saudi Pro League, we know that, of course, since then, they have been able to sign some of the big marquee players. We've seen everyone from Neymar to Benzema to Sadio Mane to Jordan Henderson go and do a U-turn, to even them attracting younger players as well. Is this part of the Ronaldo effect? Now, we know that the Saudi Pro League, Augie, is able to offer contracts and numbers and basically blank checks to players. So it was always going to be a massive attraction for them. But once other players saw Cristiano Ronaldo going there, still playing there, still seemingly having an okay time and reaping some rewards there, do you feel like that kind of set that effect as well for them to attract more of these big names that we've seen go there since?
Yeah, absolutely. If Sadio Mane or Karim Benzema were the first player that went to Saudi Arabia, it wouldn't have had anything like the impact. It would have been, in isolation, I guess. But because Ronaldo is such a big figure and just creates headlines all the time, of course it made a difference. If people think if Ronaldo's going to go, then I'm going to give it a go, especially when they talked about the sums of money. But Ronaldo, that, one of the two biggest names in world football, had chosen to go to Saudi Arabia, and it kind of legitimised it in the eyes of many footballers. So, yeah, I think it made a massive difference. And without him, it wouldn't have been anything like it, isn't it?
Well, we still have yet to see him lift the title, Gab. Does that matter at this point?
I mean, it matters to him because I think he keeps score of everything. And
he's a fierce competitor. But to the world and his legacy, if he doesn't lift one, will we be that bothered?
In Saudi? No. And nobody's going to care, except maybe some Saudi fans. But it doesn't move the needle. That's not how the great Saudi experiment ultimately is going to be judged. he wants to win every game. He wants to score goals. Tell you what, you mentioned his been breaking the men's international record. I think in the back of his mind, he's happy Christine Sinclair has retired so that he's got a target.
Yeah.
I think he needs, 60-odd goals, something like that?
What, international?
He'll go for it.
Yeah.
Internationals?
Why not?
He's nearly 40. Well, he's 40.
Well, but in his mind,
Of course, he's young.
I don't think that's going to stop him. But yeah, I think he embraced, we see this a lot, right? We see some players, we see it with MLS, we've seen it, in the past, we've seen it with Qatar, with UAE. Some players go for a lot of money. I mean, when we talk about the Saudi Pro League having a lot of money, they don't. Yeah. 4 teams have a lot of money, right? Everybody else is signing guys from the Romanian third division, right? That's just the reality of it. We've seen some guys going and saying, here's my check. Thank you very much. But this guy, he went there. He embraced it. He tweets about it. He defends it. He says it's better than Ligue 1. He goes, he cross-pollinates other Saudi-type ventures. He goes to the Live Golf. He goes to the UFC, whatever.
He's a perfect marquee player.
He has really, really embraced that side of it as well and really kind of been an ambassador. Now, does it mean it's going to be a success? I have a lot of skepticism about the Saudi Pro League succeeding at the level and being able to maintain these levels. But is the contribution he's made, I don't think anybody can say anything. And as far as him no longer scoring, is it 54 goals in his first season? Something like that?
15-51.
Yeah, 50-51, right? So let's assume that, the level is 30% higher? 50% higher? Right?
Yeah.
Yes, divided in half. 25 goals. Not many people in Europe's Big 5 league score 25 goals a season.
He's done. I mean, he's probably done for the Saudi Pro League what David Beckham did for the MLS when he signed for LA Galaxy.
It's just MLS, not the MLS.
Okay, MLS. Sorry, Los Angeles Galaxy, the Galaxy. But I just think Ronaldo's had a similar effect. Before Beckham went to MLS, it wasn't as big a league outside of the US as it is now, and it's not a huge league now. But it did encourage a stream of players to go over there. And Ronaldo's done the same in Saudi Arabia, probably to a greater effect. And like Gab said, he's done much more for Saudi Arabia than just playing football. He's become the face of Saudi Arabia in many ways. So the whole objective of his move there has been completely paid off in terms of the eyes of the Saudi Arabians.
Well, let me ask you this then, because he's nearing, I say nearing, but knowing Cristiano Ronaldo, no targets is too big, Rob. He's nearing or getting closer and closer to 1,000 goals overall for clubs and country. He says he feels like he's not going to make it because it's 80 away. That's weird to hear Cristiano Ronaldo say. But you wouldn't put it past him, would you?
No, absolutely not. And you asked the question before about Saudi Pro League titles and Champions League titles. I think that the individual milestones at this stage of his career mean far more to him.
Yeah.
I mean, he won't admit it. If he was sat here right now, he'd say, of course I want to win the Saudi Pro League title. But if he had to choose between 1,000 career goals and a Saudi Pro League title, he'd choose 1,000 career goals. That's what he'll be in his mind, thinking that he can reach that tally. And, last season with Al Nassr, he scored 50 goals. So if he has another 18 months of that, he gets close, doesn't he? So these are the kind of things that matter to him. They probably didn't 10 years ago, but now he's got so close. It's the thing that's, I would think, is driving him on to carry on. And when it comes to him deciding when he wants to retire, it'll be about how close he is to all these different milestones and which ones matter more to him.
It might be a little bit optimistic, but can you imagine if he breaks at the World Cup?
Oof.
He scores his 1,000.
Yeah.
That's exactly
yeah. That would be, I mean, if he's around 80 away and we're 18 months away, it's going to be tough. But another season in Saudi Arabia, half a season a season and a half in Saudi Arabia, some Portugal games. He could pick some easy friendlies, I guess. Play San Marino a few times. And, maybe, what a story that'd be.
Well, then it gets even better than after that, because then somebody tells them, hey, look, Pele, 1,281, why not? And then Arthur Friedenreich, 1343, and then you're home.
Well, and I think that's exactly why we're still talking about him at 40 years old, because he's never been able to say enough is enough. And you're exactly right.
Well, let me ask you this, because we did slightly touch on the World Cup factor, but realistically, in what capacity do you see him there? Now that we are in 2025, it is a little over a year away still, but this is Cristiano Ronaldo. He takes really good care of himself. He may not be able to do the step-overs against top opposition, but in what capacity do you see him there for Portugal, if any at all?
It wouldn't surprise me if he started the first game.
Oh.
Got the World Cup. It wouldn't at all. No, I spoke to Martin. You mentioned about Martinez at the Euros. Martinez comes out and said he's going to start the first game of the Euros. He scored 50 goals for Al Nassr. He's our best goal scorer in the squad. Why would I not start him? And he starts every game in the Euros where everyone else can see that he's not at the required level to play at that tournament. But if he carries on scoring, I think he's got 20-odd goals in 20-odd games already for Al Nassr this season. He goes a goal a game all the way to the 2026 World Cup. Martinez is well within his rights to sit there and go, he's our best goal scorer.
At this stage, you hit the nail on the head. Roberto Martinez doesn't keep his job based on his ability to keep Cristiano Ronaldo happy. He keeps his job based on his ability to deliver results for Portugal. He keeps calling him into the squad because he considers him part of the team. And unless you believe that between now and 2026 that could change, and it might change, his performance could drop, he could get injured or whatever, there's no reason to think he wouldn't continue doing that.
I mean, Roger Miller was 42, wasn't he, when he played for Cameroon in 94? So, it'd be 41 next year, Ronaldo at the World Cup, so he wouldn't be the oldest outfield player to play. I think he'll be there. I think he's nailed on to be there. Unless he gets injured, he'll be there because he's playing in a league where he's not having to push himself as much as he would do in England or in Spain. He's scoring goals. I mean, obviously, we were all the Euros and we saw that he wasn't as effective as he could be. It was holding Portugal back at times, but I definitely think that he'll be in the squad. Definitely.
I was just going to say that, Gab, because you wrote about that after the Euros, about Portugal's over-reliance on Cristiano Ronaldo and how that ultimately probably cost them a good run. Now, in a bigger World Cup, more chances to get further, I suppose. If you even have Cristiano Ronaldo there, he's such a larger-than-life figure. Don't they almost, it's like a crutch, you almost automatically over-rely on him, whether he's even on the bench or not. So would that be a good move?
Yeah, I mean, look, I wrote about that. I'm not saying he cost them their chance at the Euros, but it was very obvious, if you're there in person, you're watching the game, that Roberto wasn't able to build a team where you could have Cristiano, standing around when they lost possession. Basically look, and I don't want to bring Messi into everything, but if you see Messi play at the World Cup like we all did, when the ball's at the other end, when Argentina are defending, Messi is standing around the halfway line, walking around in circles, right? He's contributing zero off the ball. So, which is, Cristiano, I think, probably contributes more than Messi off the ball because he could defend set pieces because he's good in the air. But you have to build a team to accommodate that, right? Scaloni was able to do that with Argentina. Roberto was not able to do that at the Euros with Cristiano. And it really affected him. Not entirely his fault. You have other players who maybe don't do too much work off the ball, like Rafael Leao is the obvious one that comes to mind. But you can build a structure for a guy who only really becomes relevant when you're in possession. Argentina did it with Messi, and maybe Roberto can do it with Cristiano. He's certainly going to try, but that's why he keeps calling him into the squad.
One quick story on that. Portugal played a Nations League game in Scotland in November in freezing cold. Portugal had to train at Arbroath or somewhere, some lower league Scottish team, to get ready for this game. And Ronaldo, who's already broken the men's international record for goals, turned up on a freezing night in Scotland. The chances are he's going to get booted all over the pitch. Why on earth is he doing that if the end game is not to have him at the 2026 World Cup?
Chasing goals, isn't it? That's exactly what he's doing.
Chasing Christine Sinclair.
To your point, though, about building a team around a player that doesn't contribute a lot off the ball, that's basically Man City and Erling Haaland. And he scores the goals that justifies it. And Ronaldo, if he can just score a few more goals for Portugal, that it has in recent years, in big games, then why not? I'd love to see him at the World Cup and play Argentina in the second round. Portugal v Argentina in a knockout game. That'd be great.
Well, that's the perfect way to finish this very special Cristiano Ronaldo edition of the Football Reporters. Thanks to all our reporters for joining us and sharing their stories and their insights. Thanks to everybody for listening. And remember, you can follow the timeline of Cristiano Ronaldo's iconic career, which is still going on, by the way, on ESPN.com. We'll see you again soon.